That's right. There's some thumping techno music, which means welcome to the Sunday show. Hey, I'm Matt Dillahunty, and joining me this week, Forrest Valkai. How are you feeling, sir?
I wanted to be Jimmy Snow. Hi, I'm poor. I'm very bad. I've been laid up with the flu all week, but I think I'm on the mend today, so I'm happy to be here.
That's awesome. And I know my brother was just getting over the flu. I've been lucky to not only did I dodge COVID all this time, but I don't even think I've had a proper flu. It's one of those things where the new kind of mindset for me, yes, I'm vaccinated, and when there's a spike or whatever else, I'll, wear a mask or follow whatever guidelines are appropriate at that time. But just generally being cognizant of the risk of COVID has made it so that I'm less likely to get just a flu or a cold or whatever. I interact with people at a greater distance most of the time. So
yeah, no, that the simple common sense tactics to fight or any respiratory disease like COVID just so happens to work on everything else. And even that, I don't know if what I had was actually properly flu. I just know it was garbage for a few days. And so I am also every flavor of vaccinated I can possibly be. So who knows what was going on with me, but all I know is I felt like trash. And I'm now at the point where I can sit up in a chair again, and I'm very excited about it. I've also I was gonna be a gloating asshole and drink out of my never had a bad day mug, but Jimmy Snow was so upset and so sore that I beat him in mug sales. They sent me a goddamn broken mug, and so I'll just be choosing it. There you go. I hope you never have a bad day, everybody.
There you go. Never have a broken mug day.
Yeah.
So really quickly, welcome everybody to the Sunday Show on the Line. The Sunday Show is the one where we focus primarily on issues related to religion, superstition, the supernatural claims. If you believe something that you're pretty sure that us skeptic, science-minded, reason-affiliated and reality-associated people are less likely to believe in, by all means, get your calls in right now. Theists are always going to have priority on the Sunday Show and on every show that I do where I'm the host. I mean, it's possible I could end up on an episode of Skeptalk where we're talking about an issue and we don't prioritize theists. Speaking of which, tomorrow's episode of Skeptalk will be hosted by John Gleason. Next Wednesday, I'll be back live in the evening for a new episode of The Hang Up with Kane B, who's a PhD philosopher, to talk about philosophy stuff. So prepare your geeky philosophy questions about whatever little philosophy paradox you want, or thoughts, or what's the value of philosophy anyway? If you can prove anything with Curry's paradox, is there any value in philosophy? And how do we use this to mold the philosophy of science and deal comparing issues of epistemology with moral structures and things like that? There'll be lots of good potential questions this Wednesday. Thursday on the Transatlantic Call-In Show, it's going to be Katy and Arden. The OGs will be there. By the way, all of this is subject to change, and not just because we are occasionally lazy or busy. I wasn't supposed to be here today, and that's why Forrest is here, because I wasn't supposed to be here today, and I'm not here because I got done what I needed to get done, I hope, and Jimmy wasn't feeling well, and I didn't get to do as much with Forrest. So what's happening is I live in Austin, Texas, and Austin, Texas went from almost 70 degrees yesterday to about 35 degrees is the high today. And the next 3 days, the high is supposed to not get above freezing. So I think tomorrow it's listed as a low of 19 and a high of 32, I think, is tomorrow. So
sweltering.
Yeah.
It's 3 degrees here in Tulsa at this moment.
See, yeah. But Tulsa's equipped for stuff like this.
That is, we have some sort of power grid that functions sometimes.
That's right. So Texas ERCOT's power system failed during the blizzard, and some people were without power for weeks. I fortunately didn't lose power, and so we're not expecting to lose power this time, but we prepared for it, which means I fueled up the truck, because my truck has a standard 120-volt outlet on it as well. So I can use that to power electric powered space heaters, because we have a lot of reptiles that aren't going to do well if we're frozen for 3 days. And I knew some people who lost a good chunk of their collection, or at least their breeding season, to that freeze. But when I look at the forecast here for Austin, Monday's high is 30, Tuesday's 35, Wednesday it gets up to 48, Thursday it's going to be 71, and then it drops back down into the 40s again. So we're definitely hitting winter here. And I know all you people up north and elsewhere are like, yeah, whatever, it's not going to be that big of a deal. What are you whining about? And this is what I mean, the difference between where I'm at and where Forrest's at. If the road's ice here, the world shuts down, because there are no salt trucks. There is no infrastructure to deal with it. There was no infrastructure to deal with the blizzard, and the structure of our power grid and stuff isn't designed to deal with lengthy freeze periods. And it looks like we're going to get a little taste of it this week, and that's going to determine whether or not I run out and buy a generator and all kinds of stuff for the next one. But 3 degrees where you are, Fahrenheit?
Yeah, we have a couple. Yeah. We have some degrees. We have a couple of them.
I grew up in Missouri, alternating between around the St. Louis area and around the Kansas City area. So I'm familiar. And actually, one of the worst moments I ever had in any snowstorm was my parents were living in San Antonio and I was here, and we drove up to Missouri for my grandfather's funeral. And that required us to drive back home through Oklahoma after an incredible snowstorm. And that was a terrifying little segment of drive until we crossed the Red River and got back to the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
But, all right, we have a bunch of calls lined up. I've already made all the announcements. We have atheists, we have theists. Theists are always going to get priority here. But you're calling in. If you have, let me make this as easy as possible, because I say this all the time. I want to have good conversations. All you got to do, every now and then, pause, take a breath. We are going to ask clarifying questions. We're probably going to put you on hold or temporary mute so we can get some clarity. If Forrest or I ask a question, please just try to listen to it and answer as honestly you can. And if it's a yes or no question, understand that we're trying to direct a conversation to where we can get to an understanding. If you think you're calling in to just get tricked into saying, oh, there is no God, that's not the thing. We just want to make sure we're talking the same page. So when you say something like, well, I've had spiritual experiences, I need you to tell me, what do you mean by spiritual experiences? Because that word spiritual gets used by a great many people in a great many ways. And the problem is that you and everybody around you and everybody in your church, you all think that you're using that word spiritual in exactly the same way. You may be, you may not be, and you may have some common understanding. But if you're going to explain things to people who don't already share those views, then you need to be ready to say, when I say spiritual, I mean this. And it doesn't have to be, something crystal clear that you can, put in a beaker or test in a lab. We're not saying anything at all like, when we will ask you for evidence for God, we only want things we can put in a lab. We're well aware that that's not going to happen. What we want is for somebody to actually make a case for why they believe it and why they think other people should too. Why they think their reasons are good enough for other people to share that belief. And we've had countless conversations where that actually happened, and we left, or the call ended without agreement on who was necessarily right, but without fighting and animosity. Just try to have a decent little conversation, and we're all good.
Yeah, I'm into that.
You ready to start it?
I'm ready whenever you are, man.
All right. So first caller, Brad in Maryland, pronouns are he, him, who's calling to say
hello?
he has a good reason to believe in God. Brad, you're on with Forrest and Matt.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
You're here.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes,
Brad.
we can.
Awesome. I'm Brad from Broadway, Maryland, and I believe in God. I was born a Christian, but
No, you
once I
weren't.
left the church, hello?
You weren't born a Christian. You weren't born believing in a God.
Well, I wasn't
But I
born, I
get your
believe,
point.
but my family, they're heavily influenced me to be Christian. But
Yeah,
I
you were
recently
born
left
into
the
a
church
family.
only because I. Go ahead.
So one thing, Brad, is there's a slight delay. We're not trying to shut you down. We're just agreeing or disagreeing as we go. So you were born into a predominantly Christian family. You went to church for young, but now you're saying you have a good reason to believe in God. So tell us what God you believe in and what that good reason is and why you think we should also believe.
All right. Well, I believe in the God that created this universe. Well, because we're obviously living in it. I'm when I tackle the question of where do we all come from, it to me it's the same problem that I tackle when I think about, what's the smallest number or infinity or something like that. It's like our reality is logical, but it's perfectly fine if the illogical makes it logical. Just like how math is incomplete, we could still find logical statements in an incomplete system. And so what I believe is the logical did give rise to the logical. And you can't have it without that superseding part that we can't understand yet, that goes beyond what our eyes can see, what you can touch and feel. Even the cell itself, they're saying the DNA is like the structure for it. They can't synthesize it, they can't create it. I think that's because it's somewhere where we can't even see it in our reality. In terms of I don't know. I think it's just further down, maybe past quartz, past whatever.
Okay. So you believe in a creator God, but I'm not sure what to address, Brad, because I'm very confused. You said you believe in a creator God because when you're addressing the question of where we all came from, it feels to you like that's asking what's the smallest number, and that logic is somehow on an illogical foundation. And even if what you believe is logical, it's still logical because scientists can't create a cell. None of that is an
Not a
argument
cell of
or
DNA.
No. I was saying what I was saying is with the cell situation was the fact that we can't create it. Mean it might
hang
can't.
on.
Oh, go ahead. I need to cut you off. Go ahead.
Hang
Go
on.
ahead. I need to cut you
Hang
off. Go
on.
ahead.
Hang on. Stop talking. I was right in the middle of a sentence when you jumped in. I let you give everything that you had to say, and I was pointing out that what you said is not an argument, it is not evidence, and it does not make sense. It does not make sense to say it's illogical and it's okay. And it doesn't make sense to say that, scientists can't create DNA, and that means it somehow goes beyond our senses. What is the good reason to believe in a God? That's what I'm asking.
Well, because logically a system can't create itself, and so
Says who?
I don't think our system can create itself. That's what it is. I don't think that in this world we haven't seen anything that creates itself. Everything seems to be made up of something, and so if we're going with that, so give me something that's not made up of something else.
So
what's
Brad,
God made
up? A couple
of?
of things. Okay.
What?
Go ahead.
What? What's not made of anything?
What's God made of?
Well, that's the thing. He's outside of this reality. Our reality dictates that everything needs to be made of something.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna address that situation, we got to say God is not made of anything. He's made of. He doesn't have that limit. We have that limit, not God.
So Brad, we don't know the origin of the universe. You don't get to assert that because we don't know the origin of the universe, therefore the universe is God. That's not the way this works. Forrest, you had something.
No, I was going to say something very similar. Brad, what sucks about what you're saying here is that you've said a few things that I agree with, and then a bunch of things that I don't, and you've tried to use like logical, just kind of truisms, these little platitudes of like, oh well, there's some things that we don't understand, and there's some things that we don't know how to make. Like you brought up DNA, we do know how to synthesize DNA. We've known for a long time, but like even if we didn't, like that wouldn't be any mark against science or any mark against a naturalistic explanation for DNA. Just because you don't know the origins of a thing doesn't mean you get to plug in this supernatural claim. As Matt pointed out, you don't know what your God is made of, and you're coming up with this weird, like, well, God is this special exception. He's got these special bonus extra rules, when you could just be honest and say, I don't know, period. I don't know where the universe came from. I don't know where life came from. I don't know how DNA was first formed. I don't know whatever. That's a fine thing to say. You can go look for the answer after that. But when you say, I don't know, therefore it must have been magic, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, and you're making this really unjustifiable leap into illogical territory. Do you understand what we're driving at here?
Yes. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying 100%. But what I was trying to allude to was that I don't really think that something could start itself. That's why I even brought up number line, which I say, how does 0 get to 1 if there's an infinite number between 0 and 1? It never starts itself because there's no logic to that.
No,
well, I agree with you, Matt. I'm sorry, Matt, but I agree with you, Brad, to say that, like, we don't know what you go to an infinitely small number. We don't know what's there. Awesome. Perfect. So what? What you're doing the exact same thing that I just talked about. You're saying, here's this thing that's this infinitely small number. We don't know where we go infinite regression back to the beginning of the universe. We don't know. We get back, whatever it is. You have here a gap of understanding. You have this weird little logical loop where you can't get out of. You get below Planck time, and we don't know what the fuck's going on.
Right.
So then you just say, okay, well, then it must be magic then. Why? Why not just say, we don't know this, so I hope we find out someday.
Right. I mean, I guess for me, why I say that is because the statement the statement that I remember from the Bible, I don't read a lot of stuff in the Bible, but the one statement that stuck with me was, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Nothing comes before and after me. And so when I thought about that, that perfectly just fixes the issue. If you think about it, why there would be no smallest number? Maybe because God's the only thing that's at the end. And
the same thing is said in The Lord of the Rings for Eru Iluvatar. And it isn't any more true. I can tell you right now, Brad, I made the damn universe. I did it. I was here the whole time.
Well,
I'm trillions of years old.
I know that. You can't
prove that. Do you believe me because I said it?
Wow. What did you just say, Brad? Did you say you can't prove that?
Yeah, because he wouldn't be able to. If you create the universe,
all right, now I'm going to mute you. Because I'm sick of this. That was a yes or no question. The absurdity of you telling Forrest that he can't prove that he created the universe. You can't prove what you're claiming either. That's the whole fucking point. That is actually your argument, is I have no reason to not believe this weird thing, and I can't prove it isn't true, so therefore, let's go with it. You're saying, because you are convinced that the universe can't create itself, which may be reasonable, except nobody's asserting that the universe was created or that it created itself. There are models that suggest it always existed in some form, and there are also other models that propose a hypothetical multiverse that perhaps generates universes, but the truth is, we don't know. And that's the right answer. You're the one claiming you do know. And we're asking you, why should anybody believe that? And in response to that, Forrest decides to facetiously suggest that he created the universe in order to demonstrate that he can no more prove that than you can prove yours. And yet you are showing a preference for your God belief while you are dismissing Forrest and telling him he can't prove it. Meanwhile, you suggested that because in the Bible, it says, I am the Alpha and Omega, that if you think about that, it fixes everything. No, it fucking doesn't. It is an insertion in a storybook that doesn't explain anything, doesn't edify anything, and there's no way to demonstrate that any God or anything ever actually claimed to be and is the Alpha or Omega, or even what the fuck that means. You have bought into sophistry, and you think sophistry fixes this. Meanwhile, you're accosting Forrest for not being able to prove that he's God. So, okay, it's your turn. Prove there's a God.
I mean, you definitely make great points, man. I agree with you. But the thing is, if Forrest told me that he was God, if God told me he was God, if anybody came to me that say you were God, I would just want them to prove like do something that would make me believe you're God. Make a human on the spot. God, I would believe God created us. That's what I believe. So I'd expect him to
So
do
then why
something
don't
like
you
that.
do that
You
with
already
the,
believe
why
that.
don't you do that with the God that you believe in now? Why don't you do that with the God
Because
of
he already created
Christianity?
me.
How do
No,
you
he
know?
didn't
Me, I'm
create
here.
you. He didn't
Did he
create
prove
you.
it?
You don't get to
Did he
assume
show
that.
you? When did you watch God create you?
Well, I can't prove like in this current with material, but I can say that when I've lived life, I have not seen anything in our world that created itself, and so that's my premise. You know, everything
So
is made of
why
something,
don't
which is a
Brad?
problem.
Brad, why don't you believe in any other God from any other religion that makes the same claims? Why don't you believe in the Lakota God that made everything in the whole universe? Because nothing made itself. So clearly, the God of the Lakota people was actually or Quetzalcoatl or Zeus. Why didn't any of these gods ring true to you? Why is it the God of Christianity specifically?
No, that's the thing. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in Christianity. That's the thing I didn't get at. I don't believe in a specific set because I realized if I was born in any country, I'd have to arrive at God myself. So that's why I go down the trying to find it through logic and trying to find out why God wanted me to be good through logic. Like I think about, okay, a boulder is heavy, and if I lift it by myself, it's heavy. But if somebody else comes, it's less heavy, and that's something that I don't control. I didn't make that rule. That's just a rule that exists. So I
No,
just
it's not
feel
less
like,
heavy.
you know what I'm saying? There's some intangibles like I can't account for, and that's why I just prefer.
So then we circle back to the same thing over and over and over. And I don't think you've given either Matt or I a sufficient answer for it. And we keep hitting the same point, like repeatedly, is you come to this logical conclusion of like, I don't know XYZ thing. I don't know where the universe came from. I don't know how DNA was made. I don't know whatever it is. And then you plug in this extra thing. And like what I'm trying to drive at here is why don't you fill that hole with any other ridiculous thing? You don't say, I made it. You don't believe in any of the other gods on offer. You don't believe in any particular weird whatever it is. You just say there must be some sort of divine, super creative thing outside of space and time, which what does that even mean? What is outside of everywhere in a time that isn't a time? What is that? And you're not only claiming that there's some sort of reality beyond our comprehension of reality, but that there's a dude that lives there that made stuff because, and like, we're here trying to figure out like where this shit actually comes from. We're asking questions and we're admitting our faults and where we don't know things. And you're saying, nah, dude did it. There's a guy. There's this magic.
I got it now.
There's a guy.
I know how to respond.
Nobody.
Do you? Because the last 50 times you've
Yes.
asked this question, you've just said the same thing.
No, but I'm asking something different for you. Think about it like this.
Okay.
Mario is a popular game that we all know, or push know, or whatever. Mario jumping through pipes, right?
Mario.
How would he? Mario's world is about jumping through pipes. So whatever he does, how would Mario figure out what this world is about from jumping through pipes? What's the only way Mario would be able to arrive at that? If he was a conscious being who can ask questions, he couldn't do it any other way because God is too complex of a thing for you to get to. It's like E equals MC squared. It's something you got to think about a lot. So I feel like in this world where we're conscious, God gave us that ability. He wants us to find them because that's if like I said, we could have made us like Mario to just jump over our pipes and we wouldn't be able to know anything. We wouldn't be able to ask any questions, but we can't.
How you just did it again, dude. Like, this is what's so frustrating is what you've just said is, well, we wouldn't be able to know about a reality outside of our reality unless we were conscious, and we are conscious.
Right.
Therefore, there must be a reality outside of our reality that somebody deliberately gave us the consciousness to be. That's not a logical conclusion to what you said at the beginning. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to perceive of things unless we had thoughts. We happen to have thoughts. That doesn't mean that everything we can perceive of is true. That doesn't mean that everything that could possibly be thought of, and that doesn't mean that there's necessarily a thing that exists that we can't think of. It just means that we have thoughts. And then to say not only is there something outside of our perception, but there's a dude that lives there that did this on purpose is like 30 leaps into the unknown that you have no justification for. That's what's so frustrating, dude, is every single time we point out that you're making an unjustifiable leap of logic, you just do another one as if now we'll be like, oh yeah, no, of course. And I don't get how you don't see that you're stepping in the same pile of shit over and over and over. Matt, what do you have?
Hang on, Brad, hang on, Brad, hang on. It's my turn. Is it possible for something that isn't conscious to be confused?
Something that isn't conscious to be confused. Well, no.
Correct. And by your reasoning, therefore, God must want you to be confused. So congratulations, you win, because you are very confused.
I'm not confused. I mean, I wholeheartedly
you are
believe that.
Way fucking
I get what
confused.
you're saying about unjustifiable. That's unjustifiable, and I know that because we
are nonsensical and circular. This is what Forrest was just explaining to you. You can't argue that only conscious beings could possibly think about a God. Therefore, there is a God that created you conscious so you could think about it. That was my response, because they might as well just say that God wanted you to be confused, because confusion is an aspect of it. You've created a fallacious, circular argument. What we're looking for is a sound argument, valid in structure, and supported by verifiable, objective evidence. Do you have that? Or do you just have argumentum ad plumber game?
Well, how would I have evidence for this? I'm saying that something outside of our universe created it, so I wouldn't have evidence inside the universe to prove it.
Yes. Brad, no, you just hit the nail on the head, Brad. How would you possibly have evidence for anything outside of the universe? You wouldn't. So you don't get to say that exists. You don't get to say it exists if you don't have a way to believe in it. You don't have a reason to believe that it exists. And so you're not only saying that it exists, but you know what it is and who it is, and it did these things and why it did these things. And like, you're not only saying that something that you have no reason to believe in is real, but you're saying you know a bunch of shit about it. And that's crazy to do.
I never said I knew a bunch of things about it. It was very clear that I don't know anything about it. I was very clear that we live in a logical
have been
world,
very clear that you know about its reasoning. You've talked about why it made us, that it made us, how it made us, what the reasons for the parts that it gave. You said that it made everything and it gave us consciousness so that we could know. You claim to know what it did and why it did it. That's a lot of information. If I tell you there's a magical invisible unicorn, I can't fucking prove that. That's a silly thing to say. It's even sillier then for me to say, and the magical unicorn voted for Trump, and the magical unicorn really likes, James Joyce novels. And like why would I say those things when I can't back up the first thing that I said? You can't back up the idea that there's anything outside of the universe. You have no basis for that claim. And now you're also going to say there's a guy that lives there. And he's floating around in space on his magic space throne making shit. And he made a bunch of stuff and he made us because he wanted to. And while he was making us, he decided he wanted us to know about him. So he also made sure that we had the faculties to know about him. But he also gave us a bunch of other faculties for whatever ass reason. All of these additional things that all come back to the same argument that you've made time and time again, which is that you don't know where something came from. Great. Neither do any of us. What now?
Okay, so I mean that means that you all equally are right or wrong. We're all in the same place. If we all don't know what's beyond infinity,
where did you get that?
Then we all.
Where did you get that out of what I just said? Where did you get that? You just
said we all don't know. We said we all don't know a thing. We all don't know what the origin of the universe is. And we all don't know why 0 turns to 1. It's outside of our logical world.
Oh my God, 0 doesn't turn to 1. Stop saying that. 0 is fucking 0. It doesn't turn to anything. I'm sorry that you don't understand the basics of math either.
If we had nothing, how would it turn to something, Matt?
What's nothing?
You just said it.
What is nothing? What is nothing, Brad?
It's the absence of anything. Nothing is the absence of everything we have in the universe currently.
Have you ever seen that?
Of course not. Because how would I be able to see that?
So then, what do you know about it? I don't have any samples of nothing upon which to run tests. I don't know what nothing would even be. I have no example of what a nothing is. I've never heard of a nothing. I've never seen a nothing. I don't know what nothing can or can't do. So you don't know shit about nothing. And now you're saying, well, nothing can't do these things. And again, you're doing the same thing. Not only do I know this thing that I have no proof for exists, but I know the shit that it can't do. Why? Why not just say I don't know? How hard is it to just say I don't know something? I don't know how life started. I'm a biologist. I don't know the origin of life.
That's what I said. I don't know. I don't know.
Why
I believe in it strongly.
Why?
And I mean, okay. Those are my reasons, my foundations for believing. The fact is the cause. I think the same argument as cause.
I no longer care.
Like you.
No, Brad.
If you go backwards, you don't have a cause to be.
Brad.
Yes,
I no longer care. Brad, I no longer care why you believe, because you are unable to present any sort of evidence, any sort of cohesive argument or anything else. You're basically saying that, hey, when I look around the world, I don't understand why it is the way it is, but I'm going to go with a God. Well, congratulations, go with God. But you don't have a good reason to believe, which is what your call screener said. It said you said you had a good reason to believe in God. You not only don't have any good, clear understanding of a God, but you haven't presented anything at all that would be a good reason. You presented circular arguments, appeals to ignorance, fallacies, everything in the bucket except for evidence supporting a sound argument. There's no reason to care why you believe anymore, because it shouldn't convince you or anybody else.
Okay. I mean, well, I still believe in it. So I guess.
Congratulations.
Agree to disagree.
You know, it's not an agree to disagree. You're fucking wrong. You are demonstrably irrational, presenting fallacious arguments. You can say, "Well, I agree that we do disagree," but you don't have any reason for your belief. You don't have any reason, let alone a good reason. So don't walk away from here thinking that, well, we're on equal footing, because we're not. Forrest and I are sitting here saying,
we are.
No, we're not on equal.
We're both humans in the same world that don't know how it's created, so we're on equal.
We're both in a world where we don't know how it's created. But Forrest and I aren't going to make shit up and assert that because we don't understand something, this gives us a good reason to believe that we have an answer. That's bullshit. Okay. You should recognize it's bullshit. And thank you for calling.
Thank you, man.
Wow. So we've got these callers, and it's really wild because this was, I appreciate one thing about Brad is that no matter how confused it was, no matter how many fallacious arguments and circular appeals and everything else there were in there, Brad was at least seemingly willing to give his best answer for why he believes. It's just, he would not accept any sort of response to explain why that wasn't a good answer. Oh, we're all on equal footing. How does zero turn into one? Zero doesn't turn into one. If you're talking about something like Zeno's paradox, where how do you, in order to get from or to move from zero on a number line to one, you'd have to go through half of it and half of it and half of it again. Yes, you can point to paradoxes to show problems in reasoning, but all the paradoxes in the world don't add up to evidence for God.
Right.
Every gap or hole in evolution is not a place where you can insert God or infer a God. If evolution doesn't currently have a full understanding of a particular area, then that's an area where we need to keep working. But we may forever be prevented from understanding exactly how this one particular species transitioned into this other species. Even if we have strong evidence that it did happen, there may be a gap that for environmental reasons just didn't preserve evidence for us to explore. The nice thing about something like Tiktaalik was Tiktaalik is the result of science making a prediction, saying we have this species, we have this other species. The evidence suggests that these two are related. And if that's the case, then we should find an intermediate form, and we should find it in this sort of location at this sort of depth in the rock layers. So because this is when it would have existed, and this is roughly where it would have existed, which means we had to have an understanding of both species. We had to have an understanding not just of the climate now, but the time frame in which it would have lived, and the climate in different locations at the time it would have lived, in order to go to that location, because what was once a swamp is now, a dusty, barren wasteland. And we go there and we dig and we find Tiktaalik. That is, people are like, oh, evolution can't make predictions. Yes, it can. It is talking about the past, but it is
Super good at
making
it.
predictions about how we can investigate. This is the strength and robustness of this. But let's imagine that we went scouring all the places where we expected to find Tiktaalik and we never found it. Does that mean it didn't exist? Does that mean our information about the other species are wrong? Does that mean our information about climate was wrong? You don't know. And what you're doing is saying, I think evolution's wrong, so I'm going to go out in my backyard and dig. And if I don't find a transitional form in my backyard, clearly evolution is wrong. That is exactly the same type of reasoning that Brad was doing to say that therefore it's reasonable to believe in a God.
It's really frustrating when somebody like uses this argument and then we explain, I think, pretty coherently, because you and I that entire call was one argument over and over. And you and I gave him like 15 different examples apiece of why it's wrong. We didn't I don't think you and I repeated ourselves really once. We except to say you're saying the same shit again. But we gave example after example and different reasons for why what he's saying is wrong. And he kept saying like, okay, yeah, I get that. Here's my response. It's the same goddamn thing. And that's what's so it's so disheartening, because we talked about this, I think it was one of the last times you and I were on a show together, is that like what I hope the audience understands is that's what's so like annoying about being on this side of the camera, is that I know for sure that guy is going to walk away from that. He hung up the phone after that and was like, got him. They couldn't answer my question. They had no way out and they had to hang up on me and move on. I know I'm right. At the very least, we're on equal footing. We're on an equal playing field here, because I know that God's real. They believe it isn't. All we have is belief. It's just faith no matter what. And like, here we are. We're just choosing what, and no comprehension of the application of the rules of logic consistently across all variables. Because that's what we're advocating for. Just use the same kind of thinking everywhere. And he's like, yeah, but you don't have to sometimes. And that's where God fits in. And it's great. We're like, just don't do that.
I was so confused by him saying that logic is rooted on the illogical and that's okay. But essentially, Brad's case was, I believe because X. And then we're like, okay, here's some problems with X. And Brad's like, oh, that's a good point. But I still believe because of Y or X sub 2. Well, Y is just a reformation of X. And so there's still those same problems there. Yeah, but then but I still believe because of this other thing. And then we're like, even if it was different, it would be like, here's the problem with that. Yeah, but neither of us can know, and I'm still believing. So you're walking out of a conversation where you came and you presented your evidence, and it got shot down over and over again. This is exactly the same as the people who believe the last election in the United States was stolen. When Trump and them are running around lying and claiming that the election was stolen or that there was broad election fraud or anything else, they put this and all of the evidence they could come with, both evidence legally and illegally obtained, up in front of judges, and we find no evidence of this problem. Over and over and over and over again. And the people proudly proclaim, but I still believe. Well, if there is a God and you think he's going to reward you for irrationality at that level, good for you. You have now devolved into such delusion that it's no longer is there possibility of having an honest conversation about this. Anyway,
the government is evil and corrupt and stole the election. We have no evidence for that. Well, that's because the evil, corrupt, stealing government hides the evidence for it, and that's how we know, because we don't have evidence. That's how we know that the evidence is there, because they wouldn't be hiding it otherwise. And yeah,
it's wild.
You're able to think. That means God made you able to think. That's proof of God.
It's like, hey, did you kill this person? No. Well, that's what the guilty person would say. Therefore, you're guilty.
Right.
It's wild. But, there were some good points countered, let's say, or bad points countered there. We have next up is Logan in Florida. Pronouns are he, him, is a theist who wants a dialectic, not a debate. Well, that's good because that's what all of these calls are because we're not doing structure and all that stuff. Logan says, I'm agnostic, but my belief in a higher being away from mainstream religion, human conscience leads me to believe there's a greater religious meaning and a deity that we will not be able to explain. Okay, I'm really confused, Logan. So unconfuse us.
Yeah, so I actually talked to you previously. This is what keeps me saying more towards like there may be more out there in a religious sense.
Okay, hang on, Logan. Logan.
Yes?
When you say there may be more out there, are you just speculating? Because if you're not actually convinced there is something out there, why should we discuss it?
Yes, I do believe that there is greater out there, and there may be signs to we may directly have a soul.
So you'd say there may be signs. So are you saying you believe it even though you don't have evidence?
I believe it because there is evidence pointing towards there, but not for other animals.
Pointing there, but not for other what?
Animals.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry. I must have missed a step. You're talking about a god, and you're saying there's not evidence for a god for other animals? What?
Well, because it always... So, to me, whenever we talk about a soul, right, in the context of religion, everybody equates that to a type of consciousness and how we can understand the environment around us and rationalize it. But
no,
we've seen that. No,
I personally know Christians who do not believe that the soul has anything to do with consciousness at all. They believe it's a completely separate thing. I actually know a Christian who is a doctor who understands fully that consciousness is just an emergent property of the brain, and that your brain is the structure, the meat that makes conscious happen. And believes that the soul is a completely different thing, completely irrespective of the structure of the body in the entirety, like that. Yeah, so I get that's what you're saying, but that is not the universal consistent belief. If that's what you're arguing for, I promise you I have an argument against it.
Okay.
Logan, go ahead and make your case. And to make this easy, describe what it is you're making a case for briefly, and then make the case.
Yes, sir. So I've always been fascinated with the animal sciences, especially with consciousness, and I've been fascinated with Gordon Gallup Jr. and the expansive research past him of the mirror self-reflection test, where that is where we see with multiple different types of animals, but they're able to produce a type of self-awareness, which falls in line with Gerald Eldman's. Yes, sir.
Logan, I'm going to ask this again. Briefly describe what it is that you're making a case for, and then make the case. I don't need to know what you were fascinated with, and we don't need to go through the mirror test again. Just tell me what it is you're making a case for, and then make the case for it.
We see with animals that have passed the mirror consciousness test that they don't actually produce forms of secondary consciousness, but we as humans do. And it makes me lead to believe that that connects to a soul, or what is displayed with common religion as a soul.
Okay. So you're saying we look at everybody in the animal kingdom, and because our particular type of consciousness is more robust and more complicated than many of the other animals, which isn't necessarily true. I mean, other great apes seem to have very similar consciousness, but let's just assume for a second that human beings have a consciousness that is, I'll just for the sake of argument say 50% better than any other, or more broad than any other animal. And you're saying the reason for that is because what?
Because
How
I
does
believe we have something more than other animals
no,
out there.
no. Listen,
I have an answer for that.
I don't. This is it, Logan. You think I'm going to grant you? Let's just say humans. If we could quantify consciousness as a measure of robustness and complexity and everything else, I'll just say, granted, for the sake of this argument, human consciousness is 10 times superior to any other animal conscious on the planet. How on earth can that fact alone lead you to a conclusion that these beings were especially created for that?
Kind of like an application, it has a specific purpose that can then be expounded on. Like, I
No,
don't know what the more out there may
no,
be. Like, I'm not
no,
mainstream
Logan,
religion. I just,
Logan,
yes, sir.
Logan, you don't get to say two things are different, therefore one of them was intended for a purpose. Cheetahs run faster than humans, but that doesn't mean they were intentionally created to run faster, does it?
I'm dependent on their evolution and their environment, kind of.
No. How do you demonstrate that something is the product of intent and purpose? How do you demonstrate that?
I don't know directly. I don't know.
Correct. You don't know. And yet you're using the thing you don't know and pretending that you do in order to reach a conclusion about a God. That human beings, by virtue of something about their consciousness, means they were intentionally created with that purpose. Well, human beings are also perhaps more gullible than other creatures. Does that mean we were intended to be more gullible? We are, less sexually
Dimorphic.
I don't know. You can take any feature and say, here's a feature where this creature is different from this creature in some significant way, and say, therefore it is the result of intended purpose. No, you don't. That alone is not it. Intended purpose needs to be demonstrated. And until you have a way to demonstrate until you have a way to demonstrate that our consciousness was intended for a purpose, you don't get to assert that in an argument.
May I say, not an intended purpose, but a greater design?
What the fuck is the difference
Because
between an intended purpose and a greater design? Because, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, we're here, man.
You don't get design needs to be demonstrated. Purpose needs to be demonstrated. You haven't solved anything. You are. Here's the thing. You say that you infer a purpose. And then when I ask you how you can demonstrate that, you admit you can't. And so now, instead of saying you infer a purpose, you want to see if you can find different language. Ooh, can I say it was part of a different design? No, because design needs to be demonstrated. Stop looking for the right words to avoid having to demonstrate what you believe is true, and look for the reasons why what you believe is true.
But yes, sir. It's just I'm trying to not do the top down, therefore God, therefore it has to be real, but I'm seeing things and it leads me to there may be a bigger thing out there. That's how I'm seeing it. And it just leads me to the confusion.
Here's the issue that I'm having with Logan is that the thing you called in about to begin with was, to say, and again, I'm going to just use what Matt was saying. Let's just grant consciousness is this easily defined, quantifiable thing, and we have X units of consciousness that is more than everybody else. We do actually, and again, I understand that we're deliberately grossly oversimplifying this thing. I get that. We actually do know why humans have higher, what we would call intelligence than other species. We have not only an evolutionary explanation for it, that we can explain why it is, like, in terms of like how we got here, but also just looking at it today. Here's an easy little diagram you can see right now. Bloop is this. Hopefully that's on the screen there. This is a scatter plot showing brain size versus body weight across different taxa. And you can see here that you have all these different species going up this sky, and look who's way off to the side, way outside of the trend line. It's humans, with our brains being significantly larger than would be expected for our body size. Cool, right? So we got this big old thinky bit hanging on here that's totally unexpected for us. That's why we're so damn smart. That's what we got going on that other animals don't have going on. Aren't we special? Aren't we cool? Bloop, there we go. We can talk about the evolutionary history of that. We can talk about how we got here over the past, especially 2.6 million years living in Africa, with the Homo genus making better tools, having access to better resources, evolving bigger brains to make better tools, and on and on and on and on. We could do a whole breakdown of these things. Strip all that away. We don't know anything about it. You're left with a hole that you don't get to fill with magic. You just say, we don't know yet. We've known for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years that humans were exceptionally smart compared to all the other animals. And for a long time, we didn't know why. And so you know what we did? We looked for a reason. And it just so happens that now we have one, as I've just shown a little graph of one, right? We know why now. We can prove it with math. We can show in the fossil record. We can do genetics testing. We know a lot about biological anthropology at this point. What you're doing is just deliberately not using the brain that you've evolved and saying, I don't know where this came from, so therefore it must be some sort of supernatural explanation. And just like with the last caller, you're assuming that there's, not only is there some supernatural realm that we don't have any evidence for, but there's a dude that lives there, and you know about him, and you know what he did, and you know why he did it. And like, that's 15 different leaps that you don't need to take. Do you see what we're driving at here, Logan? Am I making sense?
I'm looking for more when it's probably not there. Can I ask you something, though, Forrest, directly? Because I know you focus on this.
Sure. Yeah.
The biggest reason I keep on talking about the secondary consciousness aspect is I do argue the other animals are slowly showing signs of the different things required in secondary consciousness. Like elephants are slowly showing forms of painting. Other apes are creating new spheres and whatnot. Would that, I guess, help with my fears of being alone and it turning me towards a religious aspect?
Your fears of being alone. What do you mean by alone in this case?
Well, because that's why I say I'm agnostic and I turn more into the faith aspect, is because I don't like this idea that we as humans, even though we are animals, are higher thinking, higher processes, but we don't see that anywhere else with other species. And even if it was out there. Yes, sir?
How good are you at swimming?
Decent.
Are you better than a tuna fish?
I've never tested that, so I don't know.
Well, I'm going to bet not. I'm going to bet a lot of money that you're not, right? Because the whole, you can't breathe water thing. Right? But even a wounded tuna fish is going to stay underwater a lot longer than you do, right? They're not going to come up for air nearly as often. So why don't you look at the tuna fish and say, wow, what an amazing type of thing that's very specifically designed for this swimming thing. And really, 70% of the planet is water. So the fact that there's so many types of fish out there that are so damn good at swimming really shows that God is a fish and they're the special creation and we just can't keep up. Why do you say, here's this thing that's unique to humans, that's really unique to all primates, but humans especially, and that means that God is specifically in this for us? Why don't you look at the most abundant form of life on this planet is microorganisms, and all these weird macrofauna walking around out here, all these weird macroorganisms that we tend to spend so much time talking about, bullshit compared to the countless bazillions of bacteria. Clearly, God really cares about bacteria. God wants bacteria to be here. If we're talking about animals, beetles, nematodes. You want to talk about fucking abundance and speciality? Water bears, yo. Tardigrades, are you kidding me? They can survive in goddamn space. We can't do that. So, Why do you put humans on this pedestal and pick one random arbitrary thing like consciousness and say that we're so star-spangled special because we can build a spaceship when we can't swim, we can't fly, we can't survive in extreme conditions, we are incredibly squishy, especially when we're born? Like, why don't you apply this same thinking to any other species? Why do you feel alone as the only species with this higher consciousness, which we aren't? Well, I'll grant that we have exceedingly high consciousness, and this be rare and unique. I was saying we're not unique in consciousness in general, but that could very easily be confusing. Why do you pick this one arbitrary characteristic that's unique to primates and eccentric in humans, and say that we must be the special ones then?
Not in an argumentative sense, just it's because I've looked into other cases where they've tested other types of animals that have passed, but it's up to discussion, like the magpie bird and some type of fish that I can't remember. We have tested other types of animals
Logan.
that are,
probably a stickleback if you're talking about fish intelligence, but like that, we're just certain. I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Have we tested other animals to see how they swim compared to a fish? Forrest just put together a robust point about all the different creatures who are better at certain things than we are, and asked you why you don't go to those and wonder why they aren't the special creation with intended purpose. And your response was, because I looked at these other studies of other animals with regard to consciousness. Forrest's question is, why are you prioritizing consciousness? And your answer was, because I am. Why are you prioritizing consciousness?
I'm prioritizing consciousness in the term of like primary consciousness with the MSR test, because there are other animals that don't fall within the same pathology as us directly that have also shown forms of self-awareness, which then fall under terms that we've already established.
I can swim. There are plenty of animals that have shown some capacity for swimming, but tuna fish are really much better at it. Do you not see how every time we ask you a question, instead of answering what we've addressed, you just keep going back to your pet point? It's like a little picadillo for you. Why are you prioritizing consciousness? What is it about consciousness that leads you to think it is the feature you should be looking at instead of ability to swim, ability to survive in space, ability to regrow fucking limbs?
Seriously,
because that's the ability to survive in your environment and not able to manipulate your environment to your intended purpose.
So, but the reason why consciousness
versus other fishes.
Why is manipulation of environment your criteria now? You need to give, let me be really clear. You need to give a reason if you're going to argue this feature of this group of organisms is special enough that it warrants believing it was intended. We're asking you, why are you picking the features that you're picking? And every time you just keep talking about that same feature. Well, consciousness, because you can manipulate your environment. Okay, why is manipulating your environment the feature that demonstrates intended purpose?
I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm just too human ego focused.
Yes, that's exactly the thing. When you talk about evolution, especially when you talk about, well, I'll say this. In biology, there is an issue that we call orthogenesis. Excuse me. Sorry. I apologize. I'm just getting over sickness, but there's this issue we call orthogenesis, which is believing in like a goal for evolution, that there's something, evolution has this plan in mind, that there's a direction in which it's going, that some things, like when you look at, like I've talked a million times about the Zallinger diagrams that show like a monkey leveling up into a human over like 5 easy steps. They give this impression that there's like this end goal, that humans are like the pinnacle of evolution for one reason or another, and we're simply not. Our intelligence, our consciousness, our ability to change our environment is an adaptive characteristic that evolved just like any other characteristic. We have questions about why it evolved that way, We have questions about when it evolved, but we don't have questions about whether or not it evolved. It very clearly did. And so when we look at, manipulating your environment, that's another thing that humans aren't even unique in. There's a whole field of biology or of evolution, we call it niche construction theory, which is about species that change the environment that they're in and then adapt and evolve to that changed environment. So, for us, it was, making tools and things. But you can even say like a beaver. Beaver builds a dam. Beavers live in dams better. And that dam changes the environment around them. It makes a lake. It diverts a river. It things live and die as a result of that beaver dam. And without it, the beaver wouldn't survive super well. So, like, they have made a new environment that they are better suited to live in. And that environment has lasting ramifications that outreach well beyond their specific little area. It goes way out throughout the ecosystem and changes the ecosystem permanently. So, like, why are you talking about beavers in this case? Because they have the same characteristic as us. So yeah, it's just that's the whole thing, man. Is you're picking these arbitrary things that, number one, aren't unique to humans. Number two, even if they were unique to humans, we have an explanation for, and they don't fall outside of the purview of evolution, of Darwinian evolution at all. And number three, even if we didn't have an explanation for, wouldn't be justification for plugging in magic to fill the slot. And so you've fallen into the same trap as the last caller. You've just done it more eloquently. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Can I ask you something once again, and then you can get going, because I know you have other callers. I'm sorry about that.
Sure. You're fine. Just don't put humans on the pedestal again. I swear to God. I'll reach for this phone. I'll fight you.
Just not to put humans on pedestals, but just coming specifically with
I swear to God,
understanding yourself in your environment. How is that not important with like evolution? Because like this is just me inquisitive. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm sorry. I didn't understand the question. Say it again.
So with the mirror self-reflection test, the significance of that test was to see if an animal can recognize themselves in an environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
When it comes to like other species in evolution, why is that not as important?
What do you mean it's not as important? It's equally important across the board. It is a way to identify if a species is capable of X. You could be doing this test for swimming at a certain speed, running at a certain speed, falling from a certain height and walking away. You could do that for anything. The mirror test is just as important for anybody who passes it.
I think what he's asking is like, why isn't self-awareness universally important for every species? Is that what you're saying, Logan?
That's what I was asking, because there are many animals that don't pass it, but have very same social patterns as those same types of animals that pass it. That's what I was saying.
So before, hang on, Forrest. Before Forrest gives you the correct answer, which I suspect he may have, or at least a good answer, let me make this point. You're saying, hey, why is this feature not seem to be a hindrance to other creatures? And my answer is, I don't know, but it's clearly not. And if it's not a hindrance to them and they've managed to survive and thrive and produce offspring, then there's no reason for evolution, the process. It has not selected against this, and it clearly hasn't had a motivation to select for it. But other creatures living in different circumstances might gain an evolutionary advantage from being able to do it, or at a minimum, aren't hindered by their ability to do it. So even if the answer is, I don't know, and I think Forrest has probably got a better answer than that, but even if the answer is, I don't know, that's the answer. It doesn't mean that it's, you get to infer purpose, but what's the right answer?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say something similar, so I'm glad you got that. As far as like the actual, the answer is, as far as I understand, as far as I remember, and maybe I'm wrong about this. I hope somebody corrects me if I am. That kind of self-awareness, like the mirror test and all those things, has only really been demonstrated to be a thing in social species. So, we talk about like elephants do it, great apes do it, several different types of mammals, but certainly not all of them. There's plenty of mammals that will attack their own reflection, thinking that it's a competitor. And like that, I think the animals that don't do it are kind of an indication as to why it's not universally important. For a social species, understanding myself as a distinctive entity from everybody else is important. And so if I can say, okay, so this is definitely me, this is what I look like, this is what I'm acting like, I now have a better understanding of my social interactions with other people. If I don't have that, then I'm not really going to have a great time quantifying what I'm doing in a social environment, a social landscape. For other animals, say you have some crab, whatever, sees its reflection, that's another fucking crab. I need to protect my food from that guy the same way that it would for anybody else. Having a consciousness awareness of like its body and what it looks like and things like that isn't really important. All it knows is that it exists and it's hungry and it doesn't want that other guy to get its food. That's universally fine for it because crabs don't have a society that we need to worry about. It's not necessary. Maybe it would be adaptive, but it's not. There's not sufficient selection pressure for it to evolve because it would be an expensive thing to develop. It's like wings. Wings would be great for us to have. We could do all sorts of shit, but it would be incredibly expensive for us to get them. And so, like, we don't do it because there's not enough selection pressure to push us in that direction compared to anything else. You know what I mean?
I understand. Thank you. It's just, I guess I'm too ego focused. I really got to figure this, how to get out of this bubble of mud.
There are species that can't see at all. So even if they had the mental capacity to pass a mirror test, they don't have the physical ability to even take the mirror test. There are other species, like for example, fish, basically live underneath a constant mirror, or at least a near constant mirror when there's sunlight above, where they're going to see a reflection of themselves, and they should be able to perhaps tell whether or not there's a predator or not, but I don't know what the test results are. There are other species that when they're presented with a mirror react hostilely at first because the only mirrored surface that they are likely to have seen is horizontal water. And so if you have a vertical mirrored surface, that there's a reason magicians do in fact use mirrors in some of the illusions. It's because you can create false impressions and fool your mind into thinking something is the case. And so if a species has only ever seen a mirrored surface as a flat sheet, and now there's one vertical, they can react as if they're seeing something else. But eventually they can get to a point, and maybe it takes some time, familiarity, for them to recognize. How long it takes between the time someone sees sees a reflection and identifies it is part of the test. And some people are going to be better at it. Some species are going to be better at it. Some are not going to be able to do it. And the only thing evolution isn't a thing that cares about things, but the only reason that it would be present or absent in a species is if it either presented some measurable benefit that evolution could select for, or if the absence of it produced such a negative consequence that evolution could select against.
And then also to just, this is more or less a fun fact, but I think it's kind of interesting considering the conversation here with mirrors and fish. I don't remember the species off the top of my head, but I remember learning about a study in this one particular species is super aggressive and it is very territorial. Put this fish in a tank and they put a mirror facing it, and so it sees now what it thinks is another fish of its same species, and it'll go attack the mirror, like, fuck this guy, get away from me, you know what I mean? And then they put another mirror in kind of at a 45-degree angle. So it sees another fish, but it looks like it's attacking the first mirror. So it won't attack the horizontal mirror. It's like, oh, this guy's on my side. He's attacking this guy too. Hell yeah, we're working together. But then if they change the angle a little bit more, so it looks like the second mirror is coming at the first, it's like, fuck both of these guys, and it'll attack both mirrors back and forth. And you can really manipulate this fish's angle. Just get this fish super pissed off by tweaking mirrors. And that's showing yeah, they have no recognition of themselves, but they have a really complex understanding of social dynamic of are you helping me or are you against me? Self-awareness isn't actually the most important thing, it turns out, when it comes to these basic, social interactions of fighting for territory and food and stuff. So yeah, that's the whole thing, man. Super, super common issue with people starting out learning biology is taking a look at any random thing that humans do and assuming that it's fucking special, and it's not. It's just another trait that works for us. And you can learn the history of damn near every human trait. And if there's something that we don't know for sure how it happened or why, I guarantee there's some cool research out there. I've written some about like, why humans have specific characteristics, why we evolved them. But yeah, just don't put us on a pedestal. And if you don't know a thing, that's your answer. I don't know this thing. There's no reason to put God in the gap, because I guarantee that gap's going to go away pretty soon.
Well, thank you guys for everything. And I just want to add one bit of information as well. I don't remember her name, but to help get us out of the ego self-awareness of testing animals, I can't remember her name, but we've actually tested canines as well based off of their urine to see if they could tell themselves. If they had self-awareness, but through urine, away from mirrors. But I hope you all have a good one. Thank you for the conversation.
You too, man. Take care.
Thanks.
I love the comment. Forrest is describing what I did while I was drunk at the House of Mirrors at the carnival, just fighting the mirrors.
A couple quick announcements. By the way, callers, if you're calling in, please make sure that the show audio is not playing in the background. We've had the call screener have some difficulty actually hearing and screening people to get into the show. And also, if you're listening to the show somewhere other than the however you're calling in, either phone or PC, make sure that volume is off by the time that we actually make you live. But here we go.
I see the one you're saying. I see the one you're saying.
Oh, I'm going to hold off on that one for a minute. But Chris in Florida is a former theist and pastor with a question for us. So we'll get the non-theist in here real quick. So how you doing, Chris?
Doing well, Matt. Thank you. Appreciate it, and glad to be on. Both of you guys, I want to say thank you. I've been an atheist now for about 2 years, but there was a large time of exploration, and both of you guys have phenomenal content out there, and that was awesome help. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. It's not easy. So I've been. That's kind of why I called. I've been out and open with being an atheist now for several months, and you got to understand, I come from a very extremely evangelical, young Earth creation style of belief, where everyone's very, very indoctrinated. And so all of the conversations I've had with my friends and family quickly devolve into young Earth creation talking points. They just want to try to push back and say, I just have faith in science versus having faith in religion, and kind of push everything into this idea that everything has to be in that direction. So I guess my issue is, how do I better articulate that, belief in science isn't necessarily faith, even if I haven't personally gone out and performed that science myself?
Well, you go first.
Well, people are going to define faith in slightly different ways, but if your definition of faith is just believing something without absolute certainty, okay, then it's all faith. But in reality, faith is the excuse people give when they don't have a good reason to believe something. It is not, it's not merely, belief in the absence of certainty. There are plenty of things that we believe that we don't have certainty about. And typically we try to make sure that we believe those things for good reasons. Weirdly, when people say, well, science is just faith. No, science is a robust process of testing things and submitting them to open scrutiny. It's where evidence is presented and arguments are made. It's not resolved merely by debate, but it's not the same as just asserting that something is true, especially if the assertion is, we're going to go ahead and believe this is true because we can't prove it's not true. I mean, I don't know.
That's a fair point.
I could probably play act a little bit on behalf of, what exactly are you hearing? But science isn't faith. It's not. It is the most reliable, most robust, most consistently demonstrable method and path to truth that we have. and for people to be like, oh, well, that's just faith. I'm dumbfounded at that, sort of dismissal. It's like you live in a world, like I've had a triple bypass operation, open heart surgery. We live in a world where that's possible and where people are knocking science on the internet. I saw a great meme today that the internet is where people who slept through science go to explain to actual scientists how the universe worked.
Yeah, that seems to be a lot of my people that I know in my circles are that, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is none of us had opportunity to learn science. So, I wasn't taught evolution in school. I was, I wasn't taught really much of anything, and I've pursued a lot of that myself. But when I bring up something like, the ancient age of the Earth, or we talk about anything to do with dating things and trying to talk about maybe why I believe the things I believe, the responses is usually, well, you can't prove that the speed of light's always been a constant, or that the decay rates have always been the same. And then it's just an immediate dismissal of any potential evidence.
Yeah,
that's the conversation that I had.
Uniformity. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's. Well, I was going to say that the dismissal of uniformitarianism is something that I've had to struggle with a couple of times when dealing, especially with flat earthers, because I was in an argument once with somebody who was telling me I can't prove that I'm taking it on faith, things like the force of gravity, the speed of light, and things like that. And I explained, no, actually, a part of getting a science degree, even if you're not in physics or chemistry, is demonstrating these basic laws of physics and chemistry. I myself have demonstrated the speed of light in a lab. I myself have demonstrated the force of gravity in a lab. I've shown these things to be true. I've used the tools. Not only do you learn where we learn this stuff, what the experiments were that proved it in the first place, you then go and do it yourself. And we also talk about how these ideas were refined later on. We're talking about how do you know what distant stars and planets and stuff are made of? Well, spectrometry. You use a spectrometer to look out there. I have one, as happens, on my desk right now. This is a spectrometer. You can look through this guy, and it gives you different light spectra and tells you what different gases are, and it's really freaking cool. So it's not just like, oh, this is a hypothetical thing. I've done this shit in a lab myself, and the argument that comes back is, well, you can't prove that the same laws of physics in that classroom work directly outside the door. And then the argument, if you're gonna say that this is reasonable, you need to give me some evidence of that. Can you show me any time ever in history ever where you can confirm that atoms behave differently, that light behaved differently, that gravity behaved differently? Because if not, then you're just saying, well, it's possible that everything we know about everything is wrong, therefore it probably is. And I'm sorry, that's just not good enough. What I would say to what you're talking about here, to the point to what you're discussing, how to respond to these people that are trying to tell you that science is the same as faith, that you just believe in what these scientists are saying, as if science is some dogma that we all just repeat what each other say all the time. If you're confident in it, I would start by explaining how the scientific method works. If you're confident in that, I would explain how hypothesis-driven science works. That observation does not mean that you have to observe an entire event from start to finish in order to know that it happened. If we're judging a murder trial, I don't need to go watch the guy murder the same person again to have a testable observation that's repeatable that I can then say, I know this happened. All I need is evidence of the event, maybe even just evidence of parts of the event in order to put the event together, right? So explaining hypothesis-driven science and saying, here's what an observation means. Say, for example, with evolution, the observation of that drives our understanding of evolution isn't observing evolution happen over the past 4 billion years. It's the observation is biodiversity exists. And then we ask the question, why does biodiversity exist? And so we draw from that a hypothesis. Maybe it evolved this way. Maybe what we know about Mendelian genetics actually has a large-scale implication. And so we run some experiments, small-scale evolution tests, looking for fossils, like Matt said about Tiktaalik. If this is true, here's a prediction. If this is true, then this would also be true. turns out this other thing is true. Kind of lends some credibility to this first thing, right? We build a model. We have a saying in science, all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. In the same way that all maps are wrong. The Earth is what the Earth looks like. Every map of the Earth is incorrect. But some maps are better than other maps. I'd rather have a Google Earth satellite image than some, seafaring map from the 1800s that tells you to avoid the sea monster, right? Like, some maps are better. Similarly, some models are better. And every single day, we're refining and making better models, and science is what we're there for. Reality is what reality is. All we're doing is building a map of it. And we do that by making testable predictions about things, by building theories, which aren't guesses or hypotheses. Theories are functional explanations of observed natural phenomena that are backed by all the best evidence that we have. Gravity, plate tectonics, germs, cells, relativity, the Earth going around the sun. All of these are theories because they are all the best evidence that we have from several different fields, all point to the same direction. And so we say this is probably true. The biggest thing that I would want you to explain is that science, we don't prove things. We don't confirm a hypothesis. We don't accept a hypothesis. We fail to reject things. The whole endeavor of science is trying to prove yourself wrong. And you only move forward with an idea when you can't do that anymore, with the expectation that eventually you will, and then we'll be a little bit more close to reality. Just like with the map, you draw the shape of the continent until you find this new lump, and then you add that to your map. And then you haven't found any new lumps yet, and you're looking for them. But then eventually, someday, you'll look really close at this lump and find that it's actually two lumps, and then you add the lumps to the map, and the map's even better now. And so, that's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is that if they're going to say science is just faith, and therefore it should be discredited, then, okay, we agree that faith should be discredited. We agree that faith is bad. Oh, no? Faith is only bad when it isn't the faith that you like, right? So that's that. If you're going to say you don't have a good reason to believe in science, therefore you shouldn't, okay, where's your good reason to believe in God? Because if you have some, then it's not faith anymore. And if you don't have some, then it should be as dismissible as you think science is. If your God claim can make the same kind of testable predictions that science can, if your God claim can make the same kind of advances that science can, if your God claim can save as many lives as science can, then I'm willing to hear it. But until that point, we're not on equal footing. And I promise you don't want us to be. Because trying to drag science down to that level, it's going to hurt both of us. It's going to hurt you more than it hurts me, I promise you. Anyway, I've been talking for a long time, Chris. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, I want to hear what Chris has got to say, if it was helpful or not.
Yeah, no, it is. I've listened to a lot of what you've gone through there for us with previous pieces, and I will say I used a lot of those analogies in some of the conversations I had. I used your murder trial analogy. I even talked about rolling the nice. Goblin and stuff as well. So
I'm sorry that you had to hear it all again.
No, it's phenomenal. I love hearing it again. No, don't do that. It's great that, I went through those points. I think the problem, and maybe I've reached the point of a conversation with somebody where we just have to say we can't go any further because, explaining all of those pieces did nothing for them. And even then hitting that point and saying, well, then if you believe I conceded the faith thing, well, okay, well, so what? We both have faith. Why does that make any difference? That invalidates both of us. Great. It just comes back down to, well, I've got a book, and my book is better than your science because your science has changed its mind before, and my book's never changed. And it's like, that's right. I guess maybe we're dead in the water. Maybe we can't go anywhere.
You want it that way, though. That's the best part about science, is that it changes. If science didn't change, we would still be doing bloodletting, right? We would say, if you got sick, we would drain a bunch of your blood because you have too much blood. Is that the world that you want? If science didn't work, we would still be chopping off fingers to let the demons out that cause migraines. Is that the world that you want? If science wasn't always changing, we would still be burying children in the post holes at the corners of houses to keep the wind demons from knocking the houses over. Is that the world that you want? I want my airplane to fly based on physics, not based on prayer. And so, if we're going to talk about science always changing, that's why modern medicine works. That's why we have chemotherapy. It's because science changed and we learned some new stuff and we adapted to it. So What you're saying is, I'm going to dig my heels in here at this Bronze Age sex manual. This is all I need to know about the universe, and I'm not going to learn anything else. Ask yourself, when you go to work in the morning, do you want a car, or do you want whatever mode of do you want to ride the donkey like Balaam did in the Bible? Is that your method of your preferred? Do you want the science, or do you want the Bible? Because you can't have both if that's the way that you're going to slice it and say, well, my book never changes. The world fucking does. And you want to change with it, because if you don't, you're just going to get dragged along until you're nothing. So that's, for me, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's a very weak argument to say, well, my idea didn't change. First of all, yes, it fucking has. You used to be a preacher. You know how much faith and the Bible and translations and all these things have changed over the years. But even if that wasn't the case, it was what version of the Bible you're reading. The fact that there's versions should tell you something. But even if that wasn't the case, the point of science is that it gets better. The point of society is that it gets better. We're not living like the Romans did. We're not living like the ancient Greeks did. We're not living like our ancestors back in Africa did. We're better than that now. We're smarter than that now. And we live longer because of it. So I don't know, man. If you enjoy air conditioning or textiles or vaccines or the internet that you are using to watch my stupid face at this moment, then you better be team science, because I promise you none of that shit's in the Bible.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you on that. That's and that might be where we're down to, just with me and especially the one particular individual, just because he and I were good friends from high school and went through the same bullshit education that didn't decide to teach us any real science. And I'm the one who hit college with literally no physics, no chemistry, no real biology, none of this, no cosmology or anything. And so waking up out of religion after decades and then going, holy shit, everything I knew has been a lie, has been tough for me. So seeing the people that are still stuck in it, I feel for them, but at the same time, it's so hard to communicate with any of them because of that. So it might just be a lost cause until they hit those same points that I did, where they can eventually come to those realizations.
Yeah, maybe
faith is a hell of a drug, man. You know that better than anybody.
It may be the case.
I do. Glad I'm done with it.
Every single one of us that were in religious thinking believed, perhaps for some similar reasons, but if there was one magic argument that would pull us all out, we'd already used it. And so the appeal of religions and the ability to dismiss things as faith, to deny science, to misunderstand and continue to lead the evidence where you want it to go, or to I think one of the biggest issues is prioritizing personal experience. I've been in church. I stood next to other believers, sang praise songs, felt elated, got goosebumps, was convinced by the people around me who were feeling similar that this was the presence of the Holy Spirit, because what the hell else could it be? And so I've clearly had a personal experience that I did not have any other explanation for. And all of the people in my life who I trusted were standing around having a similar experience. And all of them were like, this is God. We're in the presence of the Almighty. This is the Holy Spirit. What other conclusion could a kid or an adult in that situation come up with? It takes some personal inquiry, some curiosity about, how do we know what we know? How do I tell the difference between, why does my church do this and some other church does that? And if you go and you ask the preachers to be, well, they're false church. But yes, but the people, I'm a Southern Baptist, and the people at the Pentecostal church and the Presbyterian church and the Methodist church, they all seem to sing and feel elated in the Holy Spirit. So how much can the differences between our denomination matter if God exists and is blessing all of them? And if God doesn't exist and is not blessing all of them and not presenting all of them with this experience, then hang on, is there a non-supernatural, purely psychological explanation for why we, as a social creatures, getting together to do something as a group, feel great about it? And how this is manipulative in getting people to donate their money and their resources, all their time and everything. There's no simple answer to why someone is religious or why they're going to stay religious. And so I think, Chris, it's just going to be do your best to explain to those that demonstrate an interest and to offer your reasons why you don't believe those things or why you think they're not good reasons. And the hopes that maybe if you didn't change somebody's mind on the first time, that either you can change it somewhere down the road, or they can come up with better evidence and argument to change your mind, or the next person who talks to them will change it, because we are pattern seeking machines. And I know for me, I never knew what an atheist was, despite the fact that I would go out and witness to the lost, witness to the non-believers, try to spread the gospel to those people who don't know it. The term atheist meant nothing for me at the time. And so the first time you hear something or presented with it, it's just weird and you dismiss it. And the second time it's like, hey, I think I've seen something like that before. And the third time is when you're like, maybe there's a pattern here. And that's the sort of thing that may need to happen to people who've been love smothered and surrounded by believers, that for those old people here who remember the old Palmolive commercials where they're getting a manicure and their hands in it and they're like talking about dish soap and they're like, oh, you're soaking in it. What? Yes, it's dish soap. It's, yes, theism is wholly unsupported, and all these other theists all over the world. I think if people could see not just what happens in churches that are ostensibly similar to theirs, but in the churches that are different to theirs, in the voodoo rituals and the various. One of my favorite books is Mackey's Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, and it's a 19th century book, or it's very nearly that. We've known about how religions manipulate us for a long time. That hasn't stopped them. It's slowed them down a little, I think. And so for the people who are truly anti-science, take their cell phone away. I mean, don't actually do it because it's not yours, but use that as an example, because they're walking around with more technology in their hand than NASA had in 1969 when we actually did go to the moon.
Yep.
Anyway, enough sermon.
That makes a lot of sense, Matt. No, I agree, and I'm probably right there with you on those religious experiences. I didn't really know what an atheist was either. If you would have asked me, I'd have had the same stupid Christian answers about, well, everyone actually believes and they're just rejecting and all the dumb shit that we always said as believers. And it was really trying to answer those questions, those really difficult spiritual questions for people in the church that got me to the spot in which I was able to say, this doesn't line up. This stuff doesn't make sense anymore. And so I before I came to the realization of saying, I don't believe in a God, I did not even know what to call that, really. It was, listening to people like you guys that helped me kind of define what it was that I actually believed at that point. So, I appreciate that. And maybe I'll just kind of use those same methodologies to continue keeping open doors with these people and hope that one day they'll kind of hit the same wall that I did, where they can no longer, explain away things like the evil of their God.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's difficult, but if it was easy, I wouldn't have done this for the past almost 20 years. I'd have just
We'd be out of
the
job.
whole world the first time. Actually, there'd have been no reason for me to get involved, because we'd have settled this, thousands of years ago when we first started exploring it. And for whatever reason, people are like, oh, I don't know. I will let you go, Chris, because I don't want to start sermon number 2. I got some other calls I want to get to. But I wish you luck in combating this. And if you find in conversations with people something that, is novel, that perhaps somebody else missed, or a way to phrase stuff that has a better impact with people, by all means, call back and share it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the time, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care, man.
Yeah, it's, I've done the call-in shows for years, and, no matter what anybody thinks of me or how I do it, and I get it. I'm not delusional about what people's perception of me is, or how accurate or inaccurate it is. But over the past couple of decades, I have tried virtually every question that we've been asked 100 times. I've tried at least 10 different ways to answer it, if not closer to 30 or 40, or changing subtle variations. And my thought at the beginning was just come up with the best way to answer this that you can. My thought as I progressed after I did this for years and years was, okay, we should take a catalog of how these questions were answered and find whoever's mind was changed the most, get them to contact us and say, my mind was changed because Forrest said this, or because Matt said that, or because Shannon said this, or whoever. And it was like that gives us some data on at least what one person found compelling.
Yeah.
The problem is that may not apply to everybody else. And it might not have applied to that person a week prior to that, or a week after that. It's a dynamic.
Well, that's what's so frustrating is that like that would be such a worthwhile study for the cause of atheism, so to speak, to try to help people understand what we're coming from, and that is what the Christian organizations, and I should just say religious organizations in general, do. There are classes. There's a couple of Christian colleges around where I live, and like they have classes in apologetics, how to convince an atheist, how to explain away problems with the Bible, how to explain away and like to not to make it sound like science and religion are two necessarily opposing camps, but like we don't fucking do that. We explain, like I said in the call, like we explain, here's what the speed of light is, here's how we found out what it is, here's how you can test it yourself, we're going to figure it out. We don't have a class dedicated to, if somebody says the speed of light isn't real, here's what you say to change their mind. And here's what people here's all the logical arguments against what I'm saying. And here's what you need to say to believe it strongly. And like, here's what you need to say on the street corner. Here's what gets you the most donations. You know what I mean? We don't do any of those things because we don't need to. But it would be really helpful if for an atheist organization, if one is so inclined to spend the money on such a study, to take, I think you're right, to take former believers, which I'm sure they would have in spades, and say, what was the argument that changed your mind or had the biggest impact on you that you remember? Get a running poll of that, and then try to refine that one. I remember seeing a conference. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what it was, but it was some creationist group that was having like a public discussion, a conference, and saying, all right, so we need to stop saying this because there's a lot of good arguments against that people are just, we need to rephrase it to this. We need to say it this way. And like, when we talk about why radiometric dating doesn't work, like, these are the arguments that we've tried for the past 10 years that haven't been effective. So we're going to try these ones now. And like, they have discussions about how to argue with atheists. And like, I'm not saying that we need to engage in being professional arguers, but understanding what makes sense in the mind of a religious person, I think is really, really, really a useful tool. Because like you said, it's not going to work for everybody. But It would be nice to know what works sometimes.
I was just looking over the list of screened callers. Unfortunately, we had allowed some people. We had too many lines that were tied up with atheists. And so now we've cleared out some of those lines. And so if you're a theist caller or somebody with a belief that you'd like to defend, by all means, call in. But if you're calling in to say, I disagree with transgender women athletes being in the sport of their declared gender, which is somebody we just called, you can call the Translating Call-In show, which airs on Thursdays. Yeah. But also, I no longer care. I'm happy to have discussions about it on occasion, but if you're just like, I disagree with transgender women athletes being in sports of their declared gender, the mere fact that you could utter that sentence, it makes me not want to talk to you because you seem to only give a shit about trans women, not trans men.
That's what I was going to say. Why?
You seem to ignore the fact that primarily women's sports exist to encourage and promote diversity, which is increased by including trans folks. You seem to also ignore the fact that you are not an expert nor a governing authority on any of those sports, and that this question is something for the actual sports organizations and the athletes involved. And in the overwhelming majority of those circumstances, it's already been dealt with, and your personal qualms about it don't matter to anybody. And the only reason I want to spend any time talking to you is to get you to shut the fuck up about it, because we're tired of hearing you whine about something that you never gave a shit about ever until somebody convinced you there was a problem where there's not one. But Transatlantic
How do you
Call-In
feel
Show airs
about
on
Patricio? How do you feel about Patricio Manuel? He's a trans man and a boxer with a perfect win streak. He's 3-0, beating the hell out of all these cis men. 5 national title wins. So, like, do you? How is this a problem that you're seriously concerned about? That this person transitioned to become a man and then started kicking the shit out of all the cis men? Is this or is it just when you can mix homophobia and sexism into the diarrhea martini of transphobia that you? Well, that's, I don't know, man.
It's exhausting. And for somebody who's called 4 times and one of them was about misgendering of Jesus, get a new pet peeve. I'm tired. I spend more time, by the way, arguing with atheists lately than theists. Not, that there's a stop. I've got a debate coming up in Florida on Easter weekend, or actually the Friday of Easter weekend, at a church in Tampa, where we'll be debating aspects of the resurrection. We are finalizing preparations for End Boss. By the way, you can go to crap. I don't have my little.
You can go to crap.
You can go to crap. Damn it. You can go to. Let me tell you what End Boss is, in case you didn't know. End Boss is our 1-hour debate format, where there's 5 minutes of welcome and introduction, where we describe the format, introduce the challenger. You would be the challenger, not Forrest, but you, whoever you are out there who has a position that you want to defend, you would come in and you would get, after that introduction, 10 minutes uninterrupted to present your case for your position. And we would start taking super chats and calls at that time to begin queuing up questions for you. After you're done presenting your case, the End Boss, whoever it may be me, maybe Forrest, maybe who knows, the End Boss then attempts to steel man your position so that everyone is aware of a fair understanding of what it is that you're presenting, so that they can tailor their questions appropriately. Then there's 20 minutes of questions selected from those super chats and the calls that are selected, curated, you might say, by the End Boss and posed to you, so that you can run that first gauntlet from the crowd of, yes, that's a good question. No, that's a bad question. Here's my thing. Here's this. Boom. After that's done, then you get 10 minutes where the End Boss directly makes a list of their own thoughts and questions for you to then face. And then you get an additional 5 minutes uninterrupted to close it all out. And the only thing that happens after that is going to be a wrap up and an invitation to for people to, watch the other shows on the line and stuff like that. That is End Boss. And you can go to, is there, right? I'm losing it.
QAline.com/the line debates.
Is that one at QAline.com? Because it's not in the notes.
Right. That's what I got cookies put in the thing.
Yeah, it hasn't been up in a while, and I know we're reworking the website, so the URL may have changed since the last time it was up, but currently QNA.com/the line debates will take you to the End Boss application. QNAline.com, which is the website for the line. There'll be something up there for End Boss. But we are already in talks with the person who's likely going to be the first End Boss challenger, and we'll have notes about that as well. In addition, I know that we said this the other day. I want to make sure that I address this again, and that is that Monday's episode of Skeptalk is going to be hosted by John Gleason, but there's not going to be a Dying Out Loud on Tuesday. That's because there's a community announcement that is already up. Dave is no longer going to be doing Dying Out Loud. The show is going to essentially stop, or has essentially stopped, as Dave wants to spend his time out of the public eye, focused on his health and issues as he deals with end-of-life stuff. We're greatly appreciative of everything that Dave did. He's my friend. I love him dearly. And if he feels up to guesting on something with me at some point, I'm not opposed to that, but also I'm happy to leave my friend alone, and remind people that a good chunk of this is about how religion has co-opted everything surrounding death and dying with either fairy tales or comforting myths. And we as a society, we as communities need to do a better job of teaching people about what life is, that death is an inevitable consequence of life, and so that we can all be better prepared and treat people right in the one and only life we know we have. Anything that would be an afterlife would be an unexpected bonus. We just lost our only theistic caller who was on hold.
Yeah, I was sad about that. Yeah.
I wasn't that sad, but I'm going to address their
point.
Always
going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm going to address their point in just a second. But religions have co-opted a bunch of different aspects of who we are as a species, what humans are, this cooperative, social, confused, fearful, brilliant, beautiful, and ugly species. And religions co-opted that in order to both benefit us in some ways and to benefit the particular religions, which is why they come in conflict with each other. Death is a part of life. As far as we know, there's an end coming for everybody. And as far as we know, it's a legitimate end. If we're wrong about that and there's something after that, we don't have any way of evaluating that right now. And it shouldn't currently change any decision we make in this life until somebody can demonstrate how a decision in this life might impact the next one, rather than just asserting it. But in much the same way that religions have done a lot of damage on mental health issues by portraying them as demons and you're in need of an exorcism, and disparaging psychology and psychiatry and other, even there are people who don't want to go to a therapist because God will heal you. Jesus is all you need. How dare you go see a therapist? And Scientologists absolutely despise everything about psychiatry. And we need to take all of that back, because proper science-based understanding of the entire human, the body and the mind, there is no soul to worry about in this thing here. Addressing all of that is important, because if we give up our autonomy, our ability to make decisions for our own life, and the ability to control our own destiny and die with dignity to religion, that is not a positive. Forcing someone to suffer through a health crisis when there's another option is cruel. Forcing someone to stay married when there is an option to get out is cruel. Forcing someone to adhere to a religion that they don't believe in is cruel, and encouraging them to believe in a religion that they do believe in but does not have proof to warrant its belief is also cruel. Welcome to my sermon.
Pass the donation plate.
Here we go. We've got lines open for theists, and actually there's a couple lines open for atheists as well. So if you called in earlier and got disconnected because we're running out of space, you can call back and get screened. But if you're a theist, we're ready to queue you up. In the meantime, Savet from India, I hope I said your name correctly, has a question about mythology.
Yeah. Hi, Forrest and Mac.
Hello.
Matt, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
How do you say your name? Yes. How should we say your name?
It's Shubhajit.
Subhajit. Got it.
Subhajit? Okay.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say to Forrest that I am a huge fan of your videos, and I like each and every one of them. And
I'm so sorry.
Thank you for what you do.
I can't wait to disappoint you. Thank you so much.
So I would like to talk about that. Coming from a country where there is a very diverse culture, most of our culture and tradition is very deeply rooted in mythology and religion. So what is your opinion and about the fact that in order to understand the culture and traditions of our country better, that people should read mythological texts?
I'm into it.
The common people.
I love it. I think it's great. So like we have a mythology here in America as well that we a lot of our culture is based around. And there's different mythologies all over the world and throughout history that have shaped the cultures and traditions of the global population today. And they're intertwined and interconnected, and they're beautiful and they're interesting. You just don't have to teach that they're real. When I was a kid, we have a Hindu temple in my hometown, and I went there a lot as a kid, actually, and participated in a lot of their festivals and a lot of their feasts. And I've sat and meditated in their this amazing, I don't know, the main hall area. I especially liked the area with Ganesh, and I would just chill over there and just sit on the floor and just be for a minute, and it was wonderful. And learning that culture and learning the history a little bit and learning the different deities and what they symbolize and what they stood for and things like that, and asking questions, and it made me a more well-rounded person. My grandma used to read Greek mythology to me as a child to bed, and also Native American mythology quite a bit. And the stories of Hercules and of Aphrodite and of Zeus, and the stories of these old Lakota legends and all these things and Potawatomi legends, they made me a better, more well-rounded person. They enhanced my worldview. There are a myriad of Christian churches and Catholic cathedrals, and there's a mosque in my town, and there's a Hebrew temple in my town, and we would go to all of these things. We would go to there's a very heavy Korean population on one side of Tulsa, and we would go over there and go to these different marketplaces and like hang out with them, and like going to all of these different there's a Turkish festival. I'm just rambling, but like there's all these different cultural festivals and religious places all over my home city. And when I was a kid, we'd go there all the time. And all of these things made me a more well-rounded person. It helped me to understand the human condition better. It helped me to understand, like you talked about, why our culture is the way that it is a lot of the ways, why other people's cultures are the way they are. It helped reduce ethnocentrism in me and made me not put my culture on a pedestal to think that this is the best way to be a person. It introduced cultural relativism. It introduced linguistic relativism. It introduced an understanding that the way that I'm raised and the way that I talk about the world shapes the way that I see the world. It also helped me understand that everybody's just a person. It made me more kind and more charitable. To understand that all these different people with vastly different backgrounds, vastly different beliefs, vastly different languages and skin colors and backgrounds and ideals all need the same basic things and all want the same basic things and are all deserving of compassion and kindness and food and water and shelter and healthcare and love and all these things. It made me a very much more well-rounded and worldly guy. And I think that that's really, really important for everybody. So I'm super, super down with teaching mythology and teaching different cultures and all these things. You just don't have to teach the mythology is true. Because it's the same thing as teaching history. We should teach everybody history. We don't have to teach them that. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I've been talking for a long time. I apologize.
I'm also of the same opinion that when people, the harm happens when people start taking these things too literally. For example, have you heard of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, the Hindu scriptures?
That sounds really familiar, but I'm not going to act like I know shit about it. So go and explain it to me as if I don't know anything, because I probably don't.
Oh, the Ramayana and Mahabharata are two of the most important Hindu scriptures. They are very much like, they're actually very good literary works. They are very much like the Iliad and the Odyssey of India, but they're more ancient. So there has been, there are big things in the Hindu religion, but there have been problems like there are some particular sects of people who take these epics, these stories very literally and try to impose their beliefs on other people. So, and most of these people, ironically, most of these people who try to impose these beliefs haven't actually read these works, haven't actually read these scriptures. They they have some half knowledge about the scriptures, and then they try to impose that knowledge on other people, and they try to preach that as the truth. I think that's where the harm comes. When people actually read these stories as part of the culture or just as mythology, I think that's great. But the harm comes when they interpret it too literally.
You just described American politics. People who haven't read the Bible and take it way too serious, the parts that they do know way too seriously, and impose harm on others. You can use there's an important class. My grandma was an English teacher, and she taught the Bible as literature. That was the class that she taught. She would explain, here's the Bible as a literary study, and here's all the implications that we see across English literature and across English history that has to do with these Bible stories. So we see relations to these things. We see connections to these Bible stories in a lot of different literature and a lot of different film. God, if you can find any Western media that has any kind of self-sacrificing guy, he's going to have the initials JC, or he's going to be named Shepherd or some shit. Like, because that's that's the allegory every single time, right? And so, like, those are the things that we can learn from, and we can see there's a literary analysis here, there's a historical analysis here, there's a cultural analysis here, there's an ethnographic analysis here. But like you said, people who haven't read it properly take the little bits that they know way too seriously and do a lot of harm. So yeah, I think if these things were taught better, they could be really useful. As they are now, they're harmful, but that doesn't mean that they should be completely done away with. They should just be fixed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That was actually great hearing your opinion. Yeah, so that's it. That answers my question, and thanks a lot.
Hey, thank you so much for waiting online for so long. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was great talking to you.
Take care.
Great, thank you.
Take care, man. Bye bye.
Yeah,
Nice
I am and have been for ages a fan of teaching mythology, comparative religions, things like that. I know when I was in 9th grade, I took a comparative religions course and a mythology course. They were electives. I kind of wish they were required because knowing, understanding some aspect of that part of our culture broadly across time is critical. And I've said before that if you teach one religion, that's indoctrination. And if you teach about many religions, that's inoculation, or potentially, in the sense that you can see, mine's different from others. We had a couple calls. We're going to get to one of them right now, but there was another call that we had that vanished. So I'm hoping maybe we get them back. But Xavier in Ohio has a question about feelings.
Right on.
Hi. Yeah. Hi. So I did call in to another one of the shows kind of recently with a similar question, and they answered it pretty well, and this is kind of a follow-up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So basically, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
It's all right.
Basically,
all good.
Basically, yeah. So I can kind of like logically say that there's probably no God, right? But no matter like how much information I put into my brain, I like can't change my own mind almost, right? So like when I was a kid, I thought whales were fish, but then somebody explained to me, the differences, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. And it's really easy to change my view. But with this, it's like no matter how much I want to, and no matter how hard I try, the feeling that it like just has to be true always stays. And I guess I was wondering, could that kind of be used as an argument to say that's kind of like God not letting me go, I guess?
Absolutely, that can be used as an argument for that, because that's how religious bullshit works. Is take this vague ethereal feeling that can be easily explained by indoctrination and trauma and say no, that's a God thing, unless it's bad, then it's not. But if it isn't bad, then it's God. And so like,
Yeah.
I talked for a long time on the last call, so I'll be very brief. But like, if I've said several times on this show, if you take a kid from the age that they can understand language and tell them that the moon is made of cheese, and every single week you put them in a Sunday school and then into a church with a big congregation full of people clapping their hands and waving their arms and singing that the moon's made of cheese, and you teach them every day to say the prayers to the cheese moon at night and to thank the cheese moon for its fermented stank that keeps the world together, and that tell them that all the good people believe that the moon's made of cheese and only bad people don't. If all the bad people out there that want to hurt you, they say that the moon's made of rocks, and you don't want to be like them, because rock people are bad, but cheese people are good. And if they don't believe that the moon's made of cheese, you're not going to get to enjoy the sky cheese. You're going to be burned in the fondue forever if you don't believe that the moon's made of cheese. And you put fear into them, and you teach them moral background to these beliefs, and you apply moral implications and social implications. You're not going to be treated the same way. You won't be accepted in my house anymore if you don't believe the moon's made of cheese. If you come into my house with this rock moon abomination bullshit, I would not love you the same. I'll never look at you the same way. The moon cheese people have a family, they have community, they take care of each other, they have charity work. Look at the thousands of people that we helped after the hurricane. We helped thousands of people with our moon cheese. We distributed cheese to all of them, little baby bells to every single person to give them food when they were hungry. That's proof of our love and our divinity. It doesn't matter what the fucking claim is, no matter how ridiculous it is. That kid is going to grow into an adult that believes the goddamn moon's made of cheese, and can go to the moon and become an astronaut and stand on the rock moon and say, somewhere deep beneath these rocks, there's cheese. And really, it just matters what you mean by cheese, because like it's kind of like transubstantiation in Catholicism. It's like, it's the incidentals of the thing. It's really cheese rocks. The rocks have little holes in it, kind of like Swiss. And like it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. You're gonna have a rational thinking adult that believes something fucking crazy and will fight and go to the mat about it. And so what happened to you is that you were abused. You were taught something ridiculous, and you were given bad reasons to believe it, and you were given a boatload of trauma to stick with it. And now, like you said, you have no reason to believe in it, but you have a nagging feeling in the back of your head that you should. Yeah. That's what therapy is for.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different take, which is when you say, can this be used as an argument that, God's trying to keep me here? Anything can be used as an argument. That's what Forrest was talking about. The question is there a reasonable evidence-based argument that God's trying to keep you there? And the answer, as far as I can tell, is no, because I felt what I was told. I talked about it earlier. What I was told was the presence of God. And all the people around me were like, oh yeah, that's the Holy Spirit. This is God. And the little nagging feeling of what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? That's intellectual honesty. That is you saying, I can't disprove God. So what if I'm wrong? And all you need to do is say, hang on, why is the burden of proof being shifted to me to disprove God? I've been here, a sincere believer, wasn't trying to like, oh, I want to get rid of this God guy so I can go do what I want to do. Instead, I just followed the evidence wherever it went, and I now no longer have good reason to believe. And despite the fact that I didn't do this out of, malice or prurient desires or anything like that, God hasn't shown up to clarify anything. God hasn't shown up to provide a scintilla of evidence. God hasn't shown up to correct me. God hasn't even shown up to say, oh, I'm very sorry, Xavier. I know you're going through a lot. Here, let me comfort you by making you not have to sit here and torture yourself about whether or not you have good reason to not believe. It is only with religion that we do something like that. If you were like, man, I really don't think that aliens have visited the earth, or I don't think Bigfoot's real, or I'm not convinced about the Loch Ness Monster, there's no problem or expectation that you need to prove that those things aren't false. And yet somehow religions manage to get this hold. That is why they have been so prevalent. They put the burden and the guilt on you instead of the almighty, all-knowing, supposed creator and governor of the universe. If there is a God and you're sitting here going, oh my gosh, I don't believe, but what if I'm wrong? Oh my God, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? And there's no God coming to your aid. Fuck that guy.
Mhm.
It's not your responsibility. It's his.
Yep.
Huh. Well, so I'll start with this. I found it was funny. Forrest mentioned Catholicism. That's what I was raised in.
Yeah.
I was oh man, I don't know why I was so ready for you to be like, it's funny Forrest mentioned cheese because I have a story. Go on, tell me about Catholicism.
But I was just gonna say, one thing I was kind of taught growing up is that it is our responsibility to kind of find God, and they're basically saying like he gives us into the knowledge of him, like buried inside of us somewhere, and it's just kind of our job to figure it out. And that's like I've asked this exact same question to my priest and whatnot, and that's pretty much what he said. He said that nagging feeling is that kind of deep inbound knowledge that God put in your soul, right? That sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but at the same time, it's like it almost makes sense,
Yeah, and the issue with that is as Matt just said, what a shitty thing to do. To say, hey, God could show up and be like, yo, I'm God, here I am. God could help you find your keys. God could do something cool that you could verify. But instead, he gives you a vague ethereal feeling that could be more easily be explained by like trauma responses that we understand, and then punishes you with hellfire if you don't get the weird coded message. That sucks. That's a shitty, dumb thing to do that you wouldn't accept from anybody else. If your boss at work fires you one day and is like, well, you didn't do the thing I wanted, and you're like, what did you want? And he's like, I arranged the paper clips on your desk in such a way that you should have been able to interpret was binary code. And when you plug that binary code into a computer, it comes up to an Algerian. And when you put the Algerian through a text language, it comes up to this and it says, send an email to Betty. And you never sent the email, so fuck you, you're fired. Like, that would be crazy. But here we are, like, yeah, I had this weird, vague feeling that made me open the Bible to a random page. It came to this passage, and when I looked at the historical context of the passage, I found that it isn't true, but it's actually a parable that reminds me of this other thing. And that made me feel in my heart that God, like, that's what you're going off of. And so just like, man, I can't say that's good enough for a job. So why the hell would we say it's good enough for your eternal soul? That's wild. Just, I don't know, man. It's not good enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of agree. I am, like I kind of said, I am definitely going through a deconstruction, and I don't know, it helps. I guess it really does help to hear those things like said out loud by another person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It is absolutely essential, and it's one of the reasons why we always recommend or frequently recommend people reach out to recoveringfromreligion.org. Not only are there people there you can chat with, in text and messages, but also there's a hotline to call, because a lot of people who are going through a deconverting sort of experience are in a position where they don't have anybody to talk to. Everybody in their community, they're the odd one out. And it's the reason that Recovering from Religion exists. I'd highly recommend you reach out if you haven't already, but reaching out here and just find a local group. You don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to give up your belief, but find a group, a local secular group, see when they meet, and just go and hang out one day to see how you feel. This isn't about getting you indoctrinated into something new. It's about saying, hey, if you're constantly surrounded by people who all think exactly the same, maybe explore some people who think differently and see what happens. And if it turns out, and you may find, because I've hung out with lots of atheist groups, and there are some of them that you couldn't fucking pay me to go hang out with again, but it may turn out that, oh, wow, this is not as weird and not as scary as I thought it was. It may feel a little more normal. Or you may get there and be like, there's no way in hell I will hang out with these people again. Hopefully it doesn't keep you going to church and trying to appease a God that you can never appease. But yeah, look for secular organizations and check out Recovering from Religion.
Okay. I don't want to stay on too long, but I did. Is it okay if I ask one more quick question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so I don't remember who it was, but one of you said something like you were abused, right? And I feel like just thinking back on it, I don't necessarily remember anybody yelling at me, or obviously nobody was.
Yeah.
I would very much so remember if somebody was physical, but I feel a lot of times it's everyone's super nice. You go to church, you go after church, you go and you eat donuts, and I don't drink coffee, but you have donuts and stuff, and everyone hangs out, and then you go home and you say a prayer before your meal, and you all eat together, and it's like, I don't know, it doesn't, I don't know, I guess my stereotypical envisionation of what abuse would look like doesn't really look like that.
I'm going to say
that's by design.
I'm happy because Forrest is the one that was saying that you're abused. I'm happy to let Forrest defend that, but I want to say that Richard Dawkins has said this before, that childhood indoctrination into religion is child abuse. I agree with him. I think one of the things we need to do is change people's mind about what counts as abuse. It is not always, as a matter of fact, it's frequently not an attack that is because someone, there's something targeted at you. Quite honestly, a lot of abuse is done in the name of, I'm trying to teach you and protect you and make your life better. And this is what, my parents brought me up religious. Does it count as child abuse? Yes. I think there is an argument to be made that my childhood indoctrination to religion counts as child abuse, but I don't remotely put it in the same ballpark as children who go through vicious physical and psychological abuse. I was loved. And what I see is not that my parents had some massive problem that made them abusive, but that my parents were indoctrinated into the same thing, did the best that they could with what they understood at the time, wanted nothing but the best, but absolutely failed at one aspect of this. So I get it. The second you use the word abuse to describe, hang on a minute. What do you mean saying I was abused? My folks love me. They did was right. They were never mean.
And I didn't mean it
violence.
I didn't mean it in a bad way. Towards Forrest.
No.
Obviously, I was just clarifying.
No, I'm saying I understand how people go down that route the second the word comes up, which is why even I have winced at from times when people use the abuse. But I will say, I'm against hitting a child ever. I was beaten with a belt moderately regularly. Granted, I did things that were wrong, but that was the de facto punishment. And there was a period of time where we were living in one town and my dad was working in another. And so he would come back only on the weekends. And it's almost like mom would save up a checklist of some of the things that we did wrong in the week. And dad would show up on, Friday night, and either Friday night or Saturday after the Saturday morning cartoons, that was go out to the garage, get the razor strap, and prepare yourself because, this is going to hurt me much more than it's going to hurt you. The fuck it does. And all the people who are like, oh, I was beaten as a child and I turned out fine. No, you fucking didn't. If you turned out fine, you wouldn't be advocating to keep hitting people for problems. But that, to me, is abuse. Despite the intent wasn't to, it's not like somebody was putting their cigarettes out on me or locking me in the basement or anything, but that to me is abuse, even though it was done absolutely with the best intentions and with love and a desire to see me be a better person, but it was abuse. And for me, that's the category that religion's in, only without perhaps the physical aspect.
Yeah. And I would just say, first of all, don't apologize or have any concern about questioning what I'm saying. Please question, especially if you don't agree with me or don't understand. I am, by God, I am not beyond criticism. So, but I would say for this, you said you were raised Catholic, right?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so were you taught as a child that you talked about you had service, you had donuts together, you had camaraderie and fellowship together, you went home, you had dinner together, you prayed, all these wonderful things. While this was happening, were you taught that you are inherently sinful and evil and broken?
Original sin, yeah.
Right. Were you taught that there is a literal hell which you are not only destined for, but deserving of if you don't follow the religion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you, was there, I don't know what kind of Catholic education you had, was there corporal punishment in your Catholic education in your school?
So not for me, fortunately.
Okay. Was there corporal punishment in your home surrounding specifically Catholicism?
Were
you ever physically punished? Were you ever socially punished? Any kind of punishment whatsoever?
I guess I should reword that. I definitely, as I got older, it kind of faded down, but we definitely, get spanked and whatnot.
Well, I mean specifically concerning religion. Were you ever spanked because you were blasphemous or something like that? Yeah, was that ever a thing?
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, so fundamentally, again, take it back to anything else. Take the religion out of it. I have a kid, and I spank the kid when they do something that I don't like, which Matt was just explaining. Spanking is abuse. Corporal punishment is abuse. Period. There countless studies on this. Like, the psychological evidence for this is overwhelming, that this is something that causes harm, that undue trauma. But that notwithstanding, you were also taught that you are not a good child, that you're inherently, just by the nature of being you, bad and broken and evil and disgusting and deserving of torture. It would be a good thing for you to be tortured in agony forever. That would be the best thing that could possibly happen. And only because somebody is making this suspension of judgment that someone as disgusting as you gets to be free, gets to be saved. That's abuse. And then also on top of that, Dawkins and Nye and Krauss and several other science peoples have said, forcing a child to be ignorant of science in a society that is increasingly dependent on science and technology. Forcing a child to be ignorant of science and technology and teaching them things like creationism is also abusive. It's making them, it's withholding their progress in the world, in the modern age. So this is a culture and a family. I'm not coming at your parents hard here, but your parents did physically, mentally, and emotionally and intellectually abuse you. And they didn't do it because they're evil. They did it because they were the result of the same cycle of abuse. They were probably raised Catholic. And if they weren't, they converted and were taught these horrible things. And they thought that they were good for some reason or another. They were abused.
My dad
and so they
raised,
passed on. Yes. So he was abused with religion. He passed on that religious abuse to you. And now look what's happening. The exact kind of psychological trauma that we see with any other kind of abuse, where you're self-doubting, questioning your own. Yeah, exactly. You are doubting yourself and questioning yourself and believing that something within you that is a reasonable trauma response is actually validation for the trauma itself, saying that it was deserved and it was worthwhile, that God is actually real and that you deserve to be treated that way. That's how abuse works. So what I think that you should take into account, and Recovering from Religion and other social organizations are great at helping with this if you want to use them as a resource, but you don't have to. What I think you should take into account, though, is that this is a tale as old as time for us on this side of the camera. Almost every religious person we talk to, or I should say formerly religious person we talk to, has this story. My wife was raised, she calls it Baptist-costal. She was a Pentecostal Baptist. There was all sorts of crazy. And she is very much atheist now. She's as anti-theist as I am. And she still has times where she sits up in the middle of the night like, fuck, I'm going to hell. And then she has to remember, oh, no, and actually that's not right. I was not raised religious, but I still have times where I wasn't raised with Christianity. I was raised pagan. So I wasn't raised the same kind of religious. You say what?
I was making a joke referencing Esther's Follies. I was like, you were raised by pirates.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I still have times every now and then where I'll feel a cold spot in the house. I'm like, oh, that's my grandpa. following me around. I can feel the spirit. Like, oh no, it's a cold spot. It's air pressure has happened. Probably the heater kicked on and blew all the cold air out of the pipes, and this is what I'm feeling here. Also have times where I want to call my dad who died 11 years ago, and I'm like, oh, but he told me when I was 8 that he'd be listening, and I could do, oh fuck, that's not real. So yeah, you're experiencing the throes of trauma, and you're also dealing with the fact that you were raised with a certain set of heuristics, and it's really, really difficult to get out of those heuristics. So I think you should take into account how many people have the exact same story and the exact same struggle that you do, and realize that you are very much not alone in this. And you have a huge support network of people that care about you, that have been through this shit. And even if you don't take advantage of that support network, hopefully giving yourself the compassion to realize that you're not alone in this will make it a little bit easier for you.
Okay. That's, yeah. I certainly appreciate that. I have to say it's, I mean, I've done a lot of difficult things through my life, but somehow this is the hardest, and I don't understand. And that's where my question stemmed from. I just didn't understand why.
And that makes 100% sense. That makes sense.
I appreciate the call, Xavier. And in all seriousness, I know we talked a lot and gave you a lot to think about and everything else. Take some time, cut yourselves some slack, reach out to Recovering from Religion, call us back, find a group local to you. But at the end of the day, just keep asking questions and try to be the best you that you can possibly be. And you might be able to kind of end the cycle of indoctrination and unintentional abuse before it carries on to other generations.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, hopefully. I don't really. I'm not a very influential person, but hopefully.
You are to someone.
You can be, and you can be. Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna let you go. We don't need to keep going. I appreciate the call so much, Xavier. I hope you find something useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Take care, Xavier.
Also, Forrest, in vMix, you might want to open the chat thing. That way, I can get you messages in vMix about what's going on with potential callers and future callers. Yeah, if you
got it
in vMix. Yep, there you go. We have more calls, and we're going to get to them. We are loaded down with theist callers, so this is going to be great. It's going to be a good way to move this show closer to the end time. By the way, speaking of the end time, there isn't one. Unless Forrest has an end time that I'm unaware of, both of us are known for going, and Forrest is known for going much longer on shows than I've gone. But
yeah,
I know that we both really want really good theistic callers. It doesn't matter if you're deconverting the way Xavier was. It doesn't matter if you're a staunch believer. We just want to have better conversations, because if we're wrong and there is a God, I know both of us would love to know and what the reasons are for that belief.
Yeah.
There was a theist that was waiting on hold earlier that was a theist via opposition, becoming convinced that philosophical naturalism was self-defeating. This is their reason for being a theist. And I don't know how you can really show that theism or that naturalism is necessarily self-defeating, but I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm a methodological naturalist. And my atheism isn't contingent on naturalism being true. My atheism is the result of theism failing to meet its burden of proof. So even if naturalism is not true, the natural world so far is the only world that we have a consistently reliable method to investigate. I don't have any investigative methods for something beyond the natural world, nothing beyond philosophical speculation. And so it seems to me that if naturalism were in fact false and supernaturalism were true, this still doesn't demonstrate that there's a God. Just the mere fact that there's something beyond the natural world doesn't demonstrate there's a God. So that doesn't demonstrate theism. So whoever the caller was, at least figure out the problems with that one before you call in to defend an alternate version of that. But we have 3 more calls, and 2 of them are about evolution. So Anthony, stay on the line. We'll get to you shortly. But Marty's calling from Missouri. Marty's a theist with a question about evolution for Forrest. So Welcome, Marty. Please ask your question, and I'm sure Forrest will happily take it.
Yeah, dude.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Forrest. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Hey, well, thanks for having me on. Matt, been listening to you for a couple months now. I've been deconstructing. I'm still a theist, but who knows what's going to happen. Forrest, ran into your channel and have been pouring into the Reacteria. So thanks for that. That's been awesome.
Sweet.
But I do have, this is my question. Sorry, I'll get to it. So Forrest, you said the evolution, sorry, hold on, is like is the change in heritable traits within a population. So my question was just, has there been research and or observed data on particularly selected traits within isolated human populations? Because if evolution is the change in heritable traits within a population, then I would expect to see different populations of humans changing to their environment. There are plenty of cultures that live, at least as far as I know, there's different cultures, right, that live in cold climates, warm climates, and then there's also isolated tribes, things like that. Like, have they presented positive mutations for the environment within their population over generations?
Yes. Yeah, we have several examples of that, and I'll go through 3 of them with you. I'm seeing if I can find a cool map. Excuse me, hold on a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I might need a lozenge depending on how far this show goes. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm getting over sickness. So one thing that I would give you is let's see if I can open this up. Boop, boop, boop. Yes. So the first example that I would give is the Baju people. Baju people are, I believe, in Southeast Asia. They are a seafaring people. They live on the coast and they do a lot of fishing. They do a lot of diving. They dive down with spears and they collect things on the ocean floor. And in the Baju people, we see massive spleens throughout the population. They have spleens that are like 50% bigger than any other population of people. Why is that? Because your spleen, among other things, stores oxygenated blood for emergencies. So people with really big spleens can hold their breath and survive underwater for a lot longer. And so these people, being deep sea spear fishermen who don't have scuba equipment, these are indigenous cultures that dive down and they've evolved bigger spleens. Really cool, right? And so like that's one just example off the top of my noggin. Another one, you talked about people in different climates. There is a what we call Allen and Bergman's rules in biology, which are trends in evolution that we can see. We see Allen's rule when you are in a hotter environment. You tend to have longer, thinner appendages because that way it increases the surface area of your body and it allows for more rapid, more easy thermoregulation. As the wind blows over your long, slender limbs, you cool off a lot more efficiently. And that's why you see like jackrabbits in the desert are these horrifying, scraggly creatures with these long, skinny legs and big, long ears. And if you look at like a snow hare up in Alaska, they're these just chunks, little bundles of fluff. Bergman's rule is on the opposite spectrum. Bergman's rule is talking about body mass increases as the temperature decreases. So if you look at, for example, artiodactyls, deer and things like that. You look at a white-tailed deer roaming around here in Oklahoma, pretty small gracile thing. You look at a moose up north, huge body mass, because by increasing that body mass, for every little bit you increase the surface area of the body, you also dramatically increase the volume. And so by having more volume to your body, by being like big chunky thing, you have more protection for your organs. You have more thermal protection for your innards, and it's easier to stay alive in these cold environments. So Allen and Bergman's rules apply also to human populations. Take a look at an Inuit person versus somebody living in Sahara, in the middle of Africa. You'll see long, skinny limbs versus like kind of short, stocky people, or people like Nordic populations who are very tall but also fucking built. So you'll see that a lot in human diversity. Another example of human diversity applying to showing evolutionary trends is skin coloration. I can show on the screen here, if you can see my screen, hopefully. Bloop, this one? Yes, there we go. This is a map showing on the bottom is skin color distribution across the world. And here you see the darkest skin colors here. And on top, this is ultraviolet light saturation on the surface of the planet. So the more UV light there is, just so happens, there's a lot darker skin in those areas. Why is that the case? Well, because UV light destroys a chemical in your skin called folic acid. So what the chemical that makes your skin dark is called melanin. There's a couple of different kinds of melanin. We don't got to get into that, but melanin blocks out UV light. When UV light gets in your skin, destroys folate or folic acid, and then you have a baby. If you're a pregnant person and you don't have a lot of folic acid, you have spinal deformities like spina bifida, for example. This is why folate is a really important prenatal vitamin. So the very first humans were black. They had black skin because we evolved in Africa. And we evolved dark skin so we could have healthy babies. And then Matt and my ancestors moved way up north where there isn't a lot of vitamin D saturation, or not a lot of UV saturation, not a lot of vitamin D in the grains and the things that you can eat from the environment. If you don't have enough UV light, you don't produce enough vitamin D, you get rickets. You get very weak, brittle, and flexible bones. And once again, you're not running very fast with rickets. You're not going to be hunting down prey. You're not going to be running away from predators. And so we got lighter skin so that we could soak up what little UV radiation there was and develop healthy bones. And every other defining racial characteristic you can think of has an evolutionary history like this as well. But that's just one that's really visibly apparent, is that the skin color, the rainbow of skin colors that we see around the world today is a result of 100,000-year-old sunburns or lack thereof, and finding the right balance of UV light to make us healthy. And to this day, people with lighter complexions living in more UV saturated areas rely on sunscreen, and people with darker complexions living in less UV saturated areas rely on vitamin supplements, because otherwise you'd be horribly depressed. So yeah, those are three examples off the top of my dome of human populations varying based on their environment due to their evolutionary history, both in the short term that we can see today and in the long term that we can see globally. Does that answer your question, Marty?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it does. That's really cool. The first example too with the larger spleens, that was really interesting. Yeah, thanks for answering that. I appreciate it. Is it cool if I do a follow-up question?
If we have time for it. I'll leave that up to you,
yeah,
Matt. You're the host today. I'm just here.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
my wife brought me some cough
I really
drops.
appreciate it.
So sweet.
The appendix, I guess. So for a long time, you can correct me if the history is wrong on this. I'm just doing this because this is just stuff I hear from creationists, and then like what I'm remembering from high school and things like that. So the appendix, they used to think that it was useless, and so they called that I think it was a vestigial organ. But now they're finding that there's, I guess they're finding out that there's something in the appendix that helps the gut bacteria, so maybe it's not a vestigial organ. I'm just curious on like your thoughts on that, if you know anything about that, or maybe pointing out things that I know you mentioned the vein as a vestigial organ, but I guess my question is just if we assumed things were vestigial and then over time we're realizing that they're not necessarily vestigial, like how would you respond to that? If you
we
will.
learn new stuff. We learn new stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes something that we thought was vestigial turns out not to be. The appendix, it's a store for good bacteria for whenever we have an issue in our body where we wipe out a lot of bacteria and we need a healthy gut biome. We need bacteria in our guts. That doesn't really disturb me to say we learned a new thing. That's, again, like we talked about a little while ago, that's how science works. Otherwise, we'd be sitting here with the dogma saying, no, it doesn't matter what evidence we have. It's vestigial no matter what. As far as like, you can take that out and you can find plenty of other things about our body that show our evolutionary history. The erector pili muscles under your skin that pull your hair up. We call them goosebumps because that's what it is. those are really useful in something like a gorilla that has a lot more thick body hair. We have the same amount of body hair as a chimpanzee. Ours is just very fine and thin, so you don't really see it. But like in a chimpanzee or a gorilla or something like this, they have this really thick body hair. Those erector pili muscles, woof, you poof up. Makes you more intimidating, scare off a predator, makes you warmer, it traps more air that you can heat up with your body heat and protect you from, and insulate you. All the reasons you get goosebumps today, they're useful. There's an evolutionary history there. They just don't do anything for us anymore because we don't have that kind of hair anymore. So they are effectively vestigial. The vagus nerve is the nerve that runs down and innervates all your internal organs. You have a recurrent laryngeal branch on the left and the right side. So it comes down each side of your neck. On the right side, it wraps around your subclavian artery here and goes up. On the left side, it wraps all the way around the aorta of your heart and comes all the way back up. These are because of our ancestry with fish. In fish, that's a straight line. In us, it's real stretched out.
Not as much as a giraffe,
you can look up,
which is ridiculous.
Not exactly. Yes, the giraffe vagus nerve goes all the way down that neck and then all the way back up to the head. You tell me, if you had an engineer that used 15 extra feet of wire to plug in one thing, they'd be fired. But that's how ours works. If you make a little snail with your hands like this, or a coyote or whatever you want to call that, you'll see these little tendons popping out of your wrist here. You got a bunch of them. You got flexor digitorum longus. No, flexor digitorum superficialis and profundus, and you got flexor carpi ulnaris and flexor carpi radialis, and all these different tendons in here. But this one right here in the middle that goes right to the middle of your palm right there, that's called palmaris longus. And it doesn't do much for you anymore. It was really useful a couple million years ago when our thumbs were way over here for grasping at branches. But now, this tendon and the muscle here are so useless to us that if you have tendon damage somewhere else in your body, a doctor will cut this tendon out and transplant it somewhere else. And it's so useless that 14% of the population doesn't have one. If you do this and try this, you might not see anything here. Some people have it on one hand and not the other. 14% of people don't have one at all.
I have one. I was trying to do a wolf pack thing for you.
But like, this is another example of something that's a leftover from our evolutionary past. Feel on your ear, and back here you'll feel a little bump on the back of your ear. That's called Darwin's tubercle. It's an old muscle attachment from when we used to be able to move our ears around like cats and whatnot do, and like a lot of other primates still are able to do today. It's a leftover. It's a remnant. It's something that we don't use anymore. You can look at the very corner of your eye here. You see this little white boy or little pink guy in here, which is called a peduncle. It's either peduncle or carbuncle. It's some weird fucking name. But this little white, right? This little pink thing in there is a remnant, a leftover from their nictitating membrane, a second set of eyelids that lots of mammals and lots of birds and whatnot still have today. Lots of reptiles as well. Beavers, for example, use them to see underwater. It's like built-in swim goggles. And so, like, these are all things that we have. The appendix notwithstanding, if evolution, people pretend is like some thing that you read in a book and you believe in. But the truth of the matter is, if you know what you're doing, if you know what you're looking for, history is written all over your body. And when you study human anatomy, you start to read that history and start to learn a lot more about it, especially when you study development. I'd say that, your question was just about the appendix. There's a lot more than the appendix. And even if something isn't strictly vestigial, completely vestigial, it still shows history. And you can trace that history back. And it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, wow. I appreciate that a bit, quite a bit.
It's caruncle, not carbuncle. It's the lacrimal caruncle. I looked it up. I couldn't stand not knowing it. Yeah, it's the lacrimal caruncle. What a stupid name. I should have known that.
Yeah, it's great. Is there maybe not like a textbook, but a book that would kind of go into this stuff, or maybe even like creationists are always going on about there's no evidence for the fossil record, and I've seen that in your videos a bunch, but I would really like to maybe get some of my hands on like maybe a book if you know one about going through evolutionary fossils, what's it called, the transitional fossils, if there is one. There might not.
I'm sure there is. I can't think of one that's specifically just over like transitional fossils off the top of my head right now. I'm sure if you picked up a good paleontology textbook, you'd probably find one in there. I use I have a couple of evolutionary textbooks, evolutionary biology textbooks that I have laying around that I could recommend to you, that I like, that I've taught out of before, that I've learned out of before. I keep all my textbooks from my undergrad and teach out of those sometimes. But honestly, yeah, you can look up any decent paleontology book. Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin is about Tiktaalik, which is the one that Matt was talking about earlier on today. That's just a regular book. That's really, really cool.
Jerry Coyne's Why Evolution is True.
Yes, that one's good. Richard Dawkins wrote one called The Greatest Show on Earth, which I actually have behind me right here. This one is just a bunch of just really cool evidence for evolution, going through like observable evolution today, natural, artificial selection, genes, fossils, everything else. Those are really good ones. But yeah, I would look up, if you're interested in paleontology, I would look up a good paleontology textbook and start there. If you want one of mine, I really like, it's called Evolution Making Sense of Life by Zimmer or something. I have it over there in the corner. I can grab it if you'd like. But that's the textbook that I've learned and taught out of for a long time. That's really, really handy.
Also a couple other quick recommendations, Marty. I know we're talking up a storm here. You can actually get more information from Forrest when he's hosting Skeptalk, or from Erica Gutzik-Gibbon when she's hosting Skeptalk. There are a bunch of opportunities there and outside of this, right here on this network, but not to bias everybody towards us. Although you should like, and you should subscribe, and you should do the little chat polls, and you should make yourself known so that we continue to build an awesome community here and everything else. But yeah, one of my favorite resources, especially for things like this as a starting point, is at talkorigins.org. It is the Index to Creationist Claims. It is there will never be an exhaustive list of responses to creationist claims, but there is so much information there that anything that a creationist could try and argue against evolution, or that you're likely to hear most of the time. For example, there's an entire section on paleontology. And so the claim number CC200 is transitional fossils are lacking. There are no transitional fossils. Evolution predicts a continuum between each fossil organism and its ancestors. Instead, we see systematic gaps in the fossil record. And then there's a multi-point sourced response to countless transitional forms with 25 different references, and I see probably 12 links, give or take. And so just going through and researching what's available in response to that one claim is the start of a massive cascade of understanding of both the science behind this, and, not meaning to just be insulting, but I will because I don't care, the absurdity of creationist positions that want and are forced to deny scientific fact in order to prop up what they believe.
Yeah. Also, call me back in a couple of semesters, because I'm currently working on a second master's, and this one is focused on anatomy and vertebrate paleontology. So I'll have one of those paleo textbooks I can go for. I can recommend to you in a bit.
Well, cool. I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much, guys. Thanks for everything.
All right, take care, man.
Our pleasure. Awesome. We got a couple callers left. This one is also potentially about evolution. Anthony's calling from Virginia. Pronouns are he, him. What's your question, Anthony? Welcome to the show.
Yes, I am a theist and I am a creationist, and I did want to discuss evolution. And I do believe that evolution is false, and that's why I was listening to that previous conversation with a great deal of interest. But I guess as a theist, I think one of the main reasons I'm still a theist is that, and by the way, I'm in an area with a really bad connection, so if there's a problem, please let me know.
It's a little choppy, but I can hear you. It's a little choppy, but we can hear you. Keep going.
Okay, yeah. If, for me, life, it seems to me the only explanation is some sort of God. I don't think that and naturalistic evolutionary forces could have produced life as we see it, given the current theories and mechanisms. So I guess my question for you all is, what is some evidence for evolution that is based on observable, repeatable, testable experiments and not like inferences or assumptions about what might have happened in the past? Okay, so yeah, I guess I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, totally. Matt, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
No, go for it.
Okay.
Because let me give you an example. If you're talking about like transitional fossils, to me those seem more like interpretations of data than actual facts. It's like, well, I interpret this thing to be the transitional form between this and that type of life, but to me, I don't really see like Tiktaalik. It just seems to me like it's just a lobe-finned fish. It doesn't. So yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. Number one is I think that, okay, let's do it this way. First things first, let's agree on the mechanisms of evolution, or at least just basic neo-Darwinian evolution, right? You and I can agree that DNA exists, right?
Yes.
And we agree that genes are heritable from parent to offspring, right?
Correct.
And do we agree that genes come in different flavors called alleles, right?
Correct.
And do you agree that different alleles are better suited for life in different environments?
Yes.
Okay. So then the logical conclusion to that, and I can understand you're asking for specific evidence. We'll get there, Thomas. I'm not trying to trap you in like saying something here, but like, would it stand to reason then that the logical conclusion of what we just said is that life, if it all started out the same, diversifies into different environments? As it does, different alleles are selected for by natural selection. The ones that don't have the sufficient alleles don't reproduce as well or don't survive at all. The ones that have sufficient alleles for that environment reproduce more frequently and live more frequently. And so that's what the population shifts to. Meanwhile, over here in this different direction, the population shifts in a different direction until eventually you have completely different species because their DNA has changed so much over the course of successive generations. That would be the logical conclusion to that, right?
Well, yeah. Well, no, I actually don't agree with that, because
why not?
Where do the alleles come from? Because you're talking about natural selection. Natural selection doesn't produce alleles; it simply selects them. So we have to figure out where it's like you say it all started. You go ahead. Yeah.
No, that is correct, and I promise we'll get there. But like, okay. I'm just saying, if we had a stagnant population that had a lot of genetic diversity, so they have a bunch of alleles already there,
yes,
and there's two different environments, and they just fuck off in those different directions, they would eventually, in the two different environments, there would be a much more homogeneous genome as the alleles that didn't fit were selected against and deleted, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. So now we get to the question of where the different alleles come from. That's where we get the mutation aspect of it. And again, we're only talking about neo-Darwinian evolution here. So there's a lot more aspects to this, but this is the main one that people get hung up on. So the mutation aspect of it, your genome changes whenever it's replicated. Now, mutations that we talk about in evolution don't apply to an individual, they apply to their offspring. We're talking about mutations within gametes usually, or mutations, if you're an asexual species, mutations during reproduction in some way or another. So it's like if you were to sit down and copy a book word by word, you're going to make some spelling errors. Sometimes you might change the word then to the word than, and sometimes that word actually fits better in the sentence, so the book is a little bit more legible. There's not just one kind of mutation when we talk about DNA. There are silent mutations that don't actually change anything functionally. They don't do anything. They change the DNA sequence, but that doesn't have any actual physical consequence. But further mutations to that same silent mutation could actually make it a profound effect, suddenly making a very big change instead of just a tiny little incremental one. There are missense mutations that change the sequence of DNA to do something different. There are nonsense mutations that stop that piece of DNA from functioning the same way, if at all. There are translocations where a chunk of DNA gets moved from one chromosome to the next. There are duplications where a chunk of DNA gets copied twice, and now you have double the same chunk of DNA. There are inversions where it gets transferred backwards. There are deletions where it doesn't get copied at all. So lots of different ways for mutations to occur, which fundamentally change the DNA of an organism. Some of those mutations can be bad, some of those mutations can be good, and some of those mutations can do nothing. So this is where new alleles come from. Does that make sense, or is there anything in there that you disagree with?
Yeah, I understand that's the story that evolutionists tell, but I'm looking for actual concrete examples where it looks like some sort of macroevolutionary change would result from that hypothesis or theory.
I promise I will get there, but I want to hold you down to this right now.
Okay.
What I just said
everything
make sense?
You said.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Please understand, the reason why I'm going through this is because very often I'll give a shitload of evidence, and then we'll get back to, yeah, but you don't know how mutation works. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure we go through this bit by bit. Okay, so we understand on the mechanism of new alleles forming, and we understand the mechanism by which alleles are selected for. Natural selection is the non-random selection of random mutations this way. Now, as far as observable evidence of this happening, I'll put a link in the chat of something that's really cool. This is an experiment that I actually got to do in my undergrad in a smaller scale. Harvard antibiotic resistance experiment. Here we go. So this is a giant, I'm going to put a link to this in the chat. If you can't see it right now, that's okay. I'm going to explain it to you in detail. This was an experiment done at Harvard where they made a giant petri dish, basically. They made this humongous glass plate, and they striped it into different little sections. And on each section, they put an increasing amount of antibiotics. So in the very center of the plate, shitload of them, and then a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, until at the very end there was none. And then they smeared some bacteria on the ends and let the bacteria grow across the plate through a growth medium, like an would do in a microbiology lab. So they put some nutrition all over this thing that they could grow through. And what we found out, and what you're able to watch happen, is that these bacteria reproduce up until the point where they hit the layer of antibiotics, and then they stop because they can't grow there anymore. And then on one part, as they're reproducing, one of them has a mutation that allows them to survive in that layer of antibiotics. And then they spread out and take over that next layer until they get to the second layer, more antibiotics, and they stop. And then there's one little pocket of them that grow, and they grow out and take over, and then they stop at the next layer. And you can literally see a branching evolutionary tree in the patterns, the growth patterns of these bacteria across this plate. So these are random mutations in the bacteria, each generation slightly different than the last, until finally you get a random mutation that allows them to survive in this antibiotic environment. And then they take over that environment until you get to the center of the table, which is completely genetically distinct from the ones on the end of the table and able to grow in a totally new way. That right there is observable, repeatable, testable evidence of evolution by mutation and selection of these bacteria growing into a new environment that they weren't able to do before because of the production of new alleles.
All right. Can I ask you a question then? All right. So if you were just to, I understand that they have different, the bacteria in the middle have a different capacity, but at a morphological level, because we're looking for like the differences between a human and an ape. There's visible differences. If you were to look at the bacteria under a microscope and not examine their DNA sequences, would they look any different from the bacteria at the beginning of the stripe?
Probably not, but that's not what we were talking about.
Would they be distinguished?
Are you asking? I just want for clarity here. Hang on 1 second, Anthony. Just for clarity here, as the other layperson, are you asking if these changes or something would be visible phenotypically, or are you saying are these things that only? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Forrest get back in here. I don't understand why that's relevant, because, for example, I breed reptiles, and I could bring in 2 snakes that appear phenotypically to be identical or indistinguishable to anybody who looks at them. And yet one of them could be genotypically very different. And when they produce their offspring, that offspring could be phenotypically different from either of them. Matter of fact, we just hatched out an entire clutch of double recessive. So lavender albino and piebald dreamsicles. They're orange and white snakes that are completely different. Now, they're still the same species. They're still Python regius. So we haven't had a speciation event, but whether or not you can see it phenotypically is completely irrelevant to whether or not the genes have changed, whether or not the alleles are changed.
Right.
Well, all creationists agree there's genetic variation within populations. There's receptors. Even the Bible, there's a section in there that talks about how they would selectively breed the different cattle into different coloration groups. So this is something that's been well known for a long time. But
how does the Bible say they do that?
So I'm sorry, you cut out. I didn't hear what you said.
How does the Bible say that they bred sheep and cows and things for different physical traits? Wasn't it by having them look at certain sticks?
Mm-hmm.
I believe, if I remember correctly, that it was artificial selection.
It was. People rationalize it today, people today rationalize it by calling it artificial selection. But yeah, the Bible verse is that the cows were like placed around striped sticks and therefore they became spotted or something like that. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, like,
I shouldn't do that.
You're just fine. But the point is, what we were talking about is the mutation selection mechanism of evolution. And again, I can't stress this enough. That alone isn't enough for like big macroevolutionary changes. There's a lot more to evolution than just neo-Darwinian evolution. But like just for where we're at this moment, like we weren't talking about major morphological changes. The challenge that you gave was, is there evidence, observable, repeatable, testable evidence of new alleles forming and then being selected for an adaptive advantage?
You still hear me?
Yes, and I showed you an example. Yes, I can. Yes. So that's what we just showed. Was the thing that you said that you're asking for. Is that, do you accept that that's what that is, and then we can move on to big morphological changes?
Yeah, so there's genes within a population that are being selected, and I can.
And new alleles being produced.
I don't see a problem with that.
And that's the key.
I'm still failing to see any.
Still failing to see what?
Shoot.
You're still failing.
Yeah, I'm losing connection. I might have to call back another.
Oh man.
Yeah, I can't hear anything you all are saying. I might have to call back another time.
All right, I appreciate that, Anthony. Forrest to be on the shows quite often and on Skeptalk on Monday, and we're happy to go through stuff. He's definitely, he or Erica, are definitely the folks you want to talk to. But sorry, you're losing connection.
Yeah, I would love to continue this because this is going really well.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, and there's the end of that call. So yeah, let me do a couple of things real quick before we get on to the last call for today. The passage in Genesis 30 that I was talking about is about Jacob breeding Laban's sheep. And specifically, it says Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks, and set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the trough, that is the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks. And so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. The Bible talks about something that could easily be viewed as selective breeding, but does not. You can have sheep's fuck in front of sticks of all different stripes and everything else, and it's not going to produce striped sheeps. That's not how genetics work. What Forrest was getting to, and I know we got one more call I want to get to before we end for the day, but we're making really good progress on this. Alleles are nothing but a genes at a location. And if you agree that genes can change, that they are hereditary, then the only thing left to big changes that creationists would like to label as macroevolution, there is no distinction between macroevolution and microevolution within like evolutionary biology. This is a distinction creation making. Like, yeah, you can change little things like the pattern, but you can't change them into a new species. Well, first of all, defining species, as I've discovered recently, is incredibly difficult. And where science decides to put a species or put something within a particular taxonomic classification can change, especially as we get new information. But we can create a basic tree of life. And we'll know that, for example, humans diverged from the other great apes, 6 million years ago, something like that?
Yeah, closer to 9, but yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in that vicinity. And so it seems to, one of the questions I wanted to ask early on, but I didn't want to jump in, is it seems like he's agreeing with evolution can do all these things, but not the big thing. And for me, the only thing that's needed to justify that is time. Like time in the sense of generations. It's the reasons why we look at bacteria growing in a petri dish, because you can have way more generations in that period of time. In addition to the reptiles that we breed, we also breed rodents, both for people to potentially have as a pet or as feeders. I can go through many generations of rodents in less time than I can go through many generations of snakes. I'm going to get one generation of snake per year. I'm going to get one generation of rats per month or month and a half, probably from the same parents. And so after we started breeding rodents, we would handpick the ones we liked. Arden's been picking out for which ones are cute, which ones are friendly, which ones have Dumbo ears, which ones, have this particular pattern. We have some wild looking rats and mice with wild lightning bolts. We didn't have to breed them in front of sticks. We just artificially selected those. If, though, we had not picked which ones to pair with, if we'd just left them all in a big group, we would have still ended up with those in some certain, because some of those same rodents would have still bred. It's just we wouldn't have been steering it towards something. And so if you took all those rodents and dumped the population out, what do you get in 1 million years? Because if humans separated from our last common ancestor with other great apes 6 to 9 million years ago, whatever it is, how much change can there be in that period of time? And people tend to view this, and this is a big thing. There's lots of really good examples. There's a big thing that's a sticking point for people. They think that 9 million years ago, some other great ape gave birth to a modern human.
Yeah.
That is not, absolutely not. I don't want to do a double negative thing. That is not what evolution is saying. And one of the best examples that I ever presented is this: Spanish is derived from Latin.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been a moment in history where a Latin-speaking mother gave birth to a Spanish-speaking child. Every child has spoken the language of its parents, but the changes that took place from Latin that led it off on one branch to Spanish, which is different from changes to Latin that happened to let it off into French or whatever other, or Italian. You can see some similarities in those languages that show their origin, which also, by the way, debunks the absolute bullshit notion of the Tower of Babel being the source of language diversity, unless God's just punking us and wants them to do it. But every child
Pigeons and
learned the
Creoles
language
wouldn't
of its
exist.
parents. But that parent's language was already slightly different than their parents' language, which is why, despite the fact that Shakespeare wrote in English, a good chunk of us can't really understand a good chunk of Shakespeare, and you need to be educated on it. I speak the same language my parents did, and yet my language is considerably different. I use fuck way more than my mom or my dad, I'm sure. And so those kinds of things that change as we learn stuff, as we're influenced by the people around us, is how modern English is different from older English, and how Spanish and Italian are different from Latin. This is the thing. People look at this and say, oh, we modern humans separated from our at least last common ancestor 9 million years ago. No, our last common ancestor with the other great apes is perhaps a trivia point, because there may have been other, if some other line dies out, we would have a different last common ancestor with those apes, and it would be us, 5 million years closer to our time frame. It's not like a chicken gives birth to a crocodile. That's not what it's saying.
There's also, it's really important that you have when people talk about evolution, they talk about it as like this set punctuated thing. Where really it's a tangled bush. It's not just a tree where there's the branch and that's what it is. If you zoom in on any one of those branches, you're going to find a mess, a web, and where you have things branching off, things dying, and two things exist contemporaneously. One of them dies, one of them doesn't. Sometimes branches separate and come back together. There's a million different ways these things happen. It's a very messy, fuzzy thing when you get down to the nitty gritty of it. And I do want to point out, there actually is in biology, microevolution and macroevolution are real terms. They're just not used very often because they're not that important, really. They're just kind of vocab words. So like micro and macroevolution, microevolution refers to small genotypic changes within a population. Macroevolution refers to big phenotypic changes over the fossil record, of course, of a lot of time. I'm working right now on my sixth degree in this area. I've heard these terms seriously used 3 times ever because it's just not that big of a deal. And so you're absolutely right. People try to split hairs between these things and it's as if they're saying, yes, of course I believe in pages. You just can't prove to me that books exist. Or yes, of course atoms exist. Molecules don't. And it's where do you think one here's the book, but you can't prove to me that pages make the book. There's a page and there's a book and there's nothing in between. And it's you think this leaflet is going to turn into a book? You know what I mean? Or what is that? And so that's kind of the absurdity of it. And what I was trying to get to with that last call, where I was going eventually, was to get down to the nitty gritty of, okay, what is the actual difference between any two organisms at all on this planet? It's DNA. That's the only difference. And so if we can agree that DNA changes, that new alleles can be generated through mutation, if we agree that those new alleles are selected for through natural selection, then we should also be able to agree that over sufficient time, with that same process happening again and again, you will make sufficient changes to DNA that you will have a speciation event and the development of a new taxon, a new kind, as a creationist might like to say. And because that's the only difference. And we can look to the fossil record for this. One thing that I was anticipating, and I think he alluded to this briefly about we don't see these slow changes. We see suddenly a new thing coming in. That's called punctuated equilibrium. And that is not an affront to gradualism, because these are the two, what people teach these as competing theories, that there's gradualism, the slow change over time, and then there's punctuated equilibrium where there's no change and then all of a sudden there's crazy change. It's not that way. Both are happening. There is always slow change over time. Evolution is always taking place, but you reach a point of stability. As long as the environment isn't changing, you're not going to have very much evolution. It's going to happen slowly. It's not going to not happen, but it's going to slow way the hell down in terms of phenotypic changes. But when you have a mass extinction event, now all of a sudden you have tremendous ecological change, tremendous environmental change, and the opening of a bunch of new niches. And so you have adaptive radiation. One type of thing, one species is able to diversify. Instead of just continuing on specializing into their niche, they're able to diversify into several different new niches and change this one body plan into multiple body plans, some of them extremely different from the others. And this is indeed what we see in the fossil record. We see of mass extinction, then we see totally new organisms coming up. And so if you're a creationist looking at this, the best that you can say, if we were to strip away everything we know, the best we can say is that one time there was this kind of animal, and then they all fucking died, and then there was this kind of animal, and then they all died, and now we got people. No reason why. God made dinosaurs. God decided he didn't like it anymore. God made people next. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, like, and when we look at the fossil record, again, take away everything we think we know about evolution. What we know for sure is that here's this thing called Indohyus, and a little while later we have this thing called Pakicetus, and this little while later we have this thing called Ambulocetus, and this little while later we have Durodon, and a little while later we have whales. And they all have similar bone structures. And we can see transitions between them in their fossils. We can see transitions between them in their isotopic records. We can see all these different changes. If we say nothing else about it, we know that these different animals existed at different times, and they look really similar to one another. And they tend to line up pretty well. And they exist in different strata in that line that we can put them together in. Evolution is the natural, logical conclusion to the evidence that we have. It's not just a story that we're looking for a reason to believe in. If you just take everything that we know and throw away all the conclusions that we have, if you know the data we have, you will draw the same conclusion. I guarantee it. That's why I hope we can get that guy back. I hope we can continue that conversation because I'd really like to take him down that road. I think it would be really cool.
We're really, really close. It's one of those things where, and by the way, I stand corrected on the macro micro thing. It's for years I've been saying that's not a real thing. If it's a real thing but not a significant thing, and it's mainly the issue that creationists are misusing it, I will stop making that point entirely and instead point out the many other issues. It's like you don't have to spend any time showing what's wrong with creationism. Even if there are and continue to be lots of holes in our gaps in our understanding, there's no space in there there's no justification to stuff a God into the space of any of those, whether it's, I used to talk about this in terms of like, oh, well, speciation is the line, where we're looking for a speciation event. And that's about breeding, whether or not these things can breed together. But it turns out that's not correct either. But we've got one more call we have to get to before we hit the end of today, and I want this one. This one I might
take lots of painkillers and a nap. Wiped out.
This one I may dig in a little bit more on. But Mohammed's calling from Algeria. Pronouns are he, him, and has a question about knowledge and belief. So, welcome, Mohammed.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me all right?
If we're on speakerphone, you need to take us off speakerphone because you sound a million miles away and it's hard to understand.
No. Wait. I'll just click. You're not on speakerphone, but do I have a microphone on this? Yeah, I do. Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. There's still a lot of background noise, but go ahead and get your question. We'll see if we can do it.
Okay. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just gonna lay out my two questions, and you guys decide whether you have time for it or not, right? You guys decide me according to it and all of that. So I've been struggling with defining belief versus knowledge. I'm an atheist, but I've been on the fence for a while now, and it's just that I know that I believe in stuff, I believe in spirituality and whatnot, and I know that I don't have any evidence to convince anyone else. That's what knowledge is to me, is when you have the ability to argue for something and convince something and someone else. But because I don't have that, I feel like I'm under the whim of whoever presents an argument, whether it be for or against the existence of God or spirituality. And now I don't believe in any kind of religion. I'm more of a spiritual person. This is the niche I've put myself in. This is the rationalization I've come to, that religion is evil, but spirituality is okay. And I feel like I'm just waiting for that one little nudge to say, okay, I don't think there's a supernatural, but as it stands, I don't have any evidence for or against spirituality, and I don't think that such evidence is even possible to come by. That's my first question. So yeah, how do you know stuff, and when do you say that you know stuff? And the second question is that, so I've been raised Muslim, And I think it's terribly unfair. I think it's very unfair that people are raised on a specific belief, whether it be like Islam, whether it be Christianity, whether it be atheism, right? And I've been thinking of like having children recently, and I want to raise my child as like objectively as possible and like as free from bias as possible, so they can make their own decision, right? But like my life, because I'm on the fence, because I speak out for these things a lot, and I blame the line for that. Like since I started watching you guys, I've been very vocal about like questioning belief and stuff. I've been a social pariah. Like I can't even subscribe to the line because if someone sees it in my subscription list, it's gonna be like a disaster for me, right? It's them right outlawed here to have any other belief than like yes. So that's why like I didn't even log in with my name. So I don't want that for my child. And like I have to weigh that against the morality of like giving them bias to start with. And I don't know what the right thing to do is here.
Cool. So first of all, thanks for calling. And this is going to be a big topic that we're absolutely not going to have time to cover in detail, but I can tell you that my guest Wednesday on the Hang Up is going to be philosopher Kane B, and covering knowledge would be a good thing there. But let me just touch on this really quickly. For me, belief simply means accepting some proposition as true or likely true. Just means I am convinced that X is likely to be the case. The question of knowledge within philosophy, there is a difficult one. What do you count as knowledge and when? And this has been argued and debated, and there's a number of different schools within this field of epistemology about whether or not, for example, there's the foundationalist, the coherentist, there's the foundherentist like myself. But at the end of the day, I think for the way most people use the terms, what I like to say is knowledge in philosophy is often rendered as justified true belief, but that doesn't really solve it because you may not have access to truth. You may not be able to verify the truth. And the whole question is one of justification. That definition exists in part because we don't want to feel like, hey, does the earth orbit the sun or does the sun orbit the earth? Well, I'm going to go with the earth orbits the sun. All right. Why? Well, I flipped a coin and that's the one that won. Okay, well, it turns out I have a belief that the earth orbits the sun. It's true, but a coin flip is not a justification. And so now we can have a big, long discussion about what we should and shouldn't use as justification. I think we can all agree that no coin flip should be a justification of knowledge, although I've seen people say that God will guide the coin, and therefore it becomes a justification. But what I think people mean by knowledge, and it's interesting that you said knowledge was being in a position where you could have the ability to convince someone, which might mean you have knowledge, but it might also mean that you're really just persuasive. I mean, Trump's managed to convince a lot of people that the election was stolen, despite the fact that it wasn't. So for me, it's not about the justification itself. It's about a confidence level. If you believe something, if you're convinced of something, that's just, here's a set of all the things that I'm convinced. There's a subset of those things I'm convinced of that we identify as knowledge. And I think what most people mean is, the way I define it, knowledge is a belief held to such a high degree of confidence that it would be worldview altering to discover it was wrong. It's not about absolute certainty. It is just, this belief is so well established. There's so much evidence for it and such a dearth of evidence against it that if it were wrong, it would change so much about my worldview that I would not be able to function. Finding out, this is like you live in the Matrix. If you were to find out you actually do live in the Matrix, that would devastate someone's view of reality. What is reality then? And so I'm less worried about how people decide what counts as knowledge than I am about what they believe and why, because we don't wait until we have knowledge we always act in accordance with what we believe is true. If you are 50.1% convinced that something is true, you're going to act in accordance with those odds until there's some intervening or countervening reason to get you to not act that way. And so I don't have a good answer to the first question, which is, how do you know? What makes something, knowledge? Other than to say, there are some things that we identify as knowledge because humanity, not one human, but the entirety of humanity accepts these as real. And that's stuff like, there is a sun up in the sky, and there is a daytime and a nighttime. Some of these basic facts about the world we experience, they count as knowledge for many different reasons. One, because we have tons of evidence for them and no evidence against them. Also, because to whatever extent you and I share a world, you can validate whether or not you see a sun in the sky. We may not know whether it's orbiting us or we're orbiting it, but all of us together can verify this. It's been said that knowledge of reality are the things that don't go away when you stop believing in them. None of those answers are particularly glib. I'm gonna skip the rest of knowledge because we can talk about it on potentially on Wednesday with Kane. You had a question about not having evidence for or against the supernatural, which is already a little bit of a problem because you don't need evidence against something to not believe it. You need evidence for something to believe it. And until there's evidence for, you shouldn't. But you were asking about raising a child. You are in a very difficult situation. You're in a country where you are not as free to express yourself and to go against, the dominant religion. Even moving to places near you could be a potential improvement. I don't know. I've never lived in Algeria or Tunisia or Morocco or anything like that. But I think there are plenty of people, unfortunately, who have lived their life without the freedom to exercise their natural skepticism or their trained skepticism publicly. And what you want to do from your own statement is to raise a kid where they are as free as they can be under the system that you're in to question and doubt. And they get that entirely from you, from how you allow them to act in your home. It may be, and I'm not in your situation, so I don't know. It may be that you have to caution your child about what is acceptable to talk about outside of the home, but that they get to be themselves and ask questions inside the home. That might be the best you can do to start with. I'm reluctant to give advice to other people on how to raise their children, especially in an environment that I don't know anything about other than what you've told me. But let me offer you this, if it's any comfort. The fact that you are asking questions about this and you want to give your child a life that may be as free as possible from an oppressive, externally imposed religious identity, I feel pretty confident that you'll find a way to do right and that your kid will find a way to be as free as they can, given everything there. It's not worth panicking about. It's just worth continuing the diligence you've already exercised. The mere fact that you're asking questions is, suggesting to me you're going to do fine. And, that may involve moving at some point, but at a minimum, I'm glad that your kid is going to grow up around you rather than growing up around the people that you're trying to hide from. That's the key.
Yep.
Thank you. That brings a tear to my eyes. Really, thank you. While on the subject of knowing nothing about Algeria, there's this bit where Forrest got into the not so clear instructions and stuff. There's no such thing as Algerian. I'll just have, they like we speak Arabic. But yeah.
Yeah, I saw you on the call screen over there, and I jumped to a thing, and I don't know. I just yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I guessed that. I had guessed that's what's happened. But like, do I have time to expand on like one point, please?
Yeah, I'll give you another minute or so to try to hit another point. I just don't know how much of it we'll be able to address, and I don't want to leave you hanging. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So like you said that you have to have evidence for something to believe in it, and that's why like believing in spirituality is not reasonable. And the difficult position I find myself in.
Go ahead.
Yes.
I was gonna say
okay.
that part of
the
this
difficult
is,
position.
part I was gonna say, I realize there's a huge delay. That's probably the problem. I don't know what spirituality is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you mean by it. I don't know what other people mean by it. I've been asking for decades now. I don't tend to get a good answer, but whatever it is, we need a good reason to believe it. And that's true for everything. If you tell me there's a 4-leaf clover in my backyard, okay, I'll believe it when I have good evidence for it. If you tell me there's a 23-leaf clover in my backyard, I'll believe that when I have good evidence for it. If you tell me there's a magical 23-leaf clover in my backyard, I'll believe that when there's evidence for it. I don't need evidence to not believe these things.
Yes, but I think like claiming that everything in the world is like everything that is real is natural, and like what we see is what we get, basically, is like a claim in of itself. And like I think that also needs corroboration, and I don't think that it's possible to get the kind of evidence that would convince me of one claim over another. That's the problem I find myself in. That like the other side is also a positive claim.
So here's the thing. This is what I was addressing earlier. I'm not saying that the natural world is all that exists. I'm saying the natural world exists. I have evidence for that. If there's something beyond the natural world, I'll believe that when there's evidence for it. You don't have to have this position of the natural world is all that exists, because I can tell you this, my position right now is the natural world is all that I know I can explore. Until somebody gives me a way to test and investigate something beyond the natural world, I can't accept it. I have no reason to accept it. It's not that I'm saying that doesn't exist. It's the same thing with in a decent system where you are presumed innocent until guilt is demonstrated. The burden of proof is on the claim that you're guilty. It's not like you should have to walk into a courtroom and prove that you're innocent. Nobody should have to prove that the natural world is all that exists, because it may be the case that the natural world isn't all that exists. But the time to believe there's something more is when there's evidence for it.
So you think I'm justified in my like fence sitting, basically, that's like I don't know either way.
Sure.
But like I'm gonna believe in what makes me feel better, because like it is of no consequence either way.
No.
That's my position right now.
Yeah. So no. I'm in agreement that it's fine to say, I don't know whether or not there's a supernatural world. I'm not in agreement with, I'm going to believe whichever one makes me feel better. See, I don't think belief is a choice. And I don't think whether or not something makes you feel good makes a belief justified. I think you are either convinced of something or you're not. You can be convinced for good reasons or bad reasons. And I think because it makes me feel good is a bad reason. Now, it may still make you feel good, and you may be right, and it may have some benefits, and all of those together might be a good reason to go ahead and act in accordance with a belief. But I don't personally, like, what if I have cancer and I don't go get any evidence? So I have no knowledge that I have cancer, but I'm going to keep believing that I don't have cancer because that belief makes me feel better than the belief or the knowledge that I do. There are plenty of scenarios where believing something that makes you feel better leads to the worst possible outcome. Christianity made me feel really good, feeling that I was the special creation of a God, that I was going to spend forever in an afterlife with my relatives. That felt really good. The notion that I walked down the aisle at the age of 5 and got saved and I was going to go to be in heaven, that made me feel really good. But what it also did was it kept me involved in a religion that was harmful to me and to others as well. And if I live my whole life with the comforting belief that there's an afterlife, that changes how I interact with people in this life. And that has consequences. So while I'm in agreement with you that you might be in a position where you don't know whether or not the natural world's all there is, or you don't know whether or not there's a supernatural world, I'm not going to agree that it's okay to believe something just because it feels good. It may or may not be harmful. They're not all beliefs are equally harmful, but yeah.
So what I'm getting from you is, I'm sorry, like I try to break down things into like really small, concise statements. What I'm getting from you is, don't worry about believing in either things. Just keep looking.
Yes.
Is that at all like? Yeah.
100%. 100%.
I want to come to Algeria now because this is the best call I've done in, I don't know, 6 months, maybe
years. You know, that really is it, man. And that's
it's an honor to be on the line. And like before I leave, I want to thank you both for giving me the time, and I want to thank Forrest especially for his series, The Life of Evolution. It was amazing. Like I have a lot of talking points now. I love it to bits. Thank you. I know it took a lot of work, and you didn't have to do that, but you did, and I'm forever grateful.
Well, thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. If you want to learn more introductory biology stuff, I've got a new series coming out this year called Biologic, where we're just going to go over freshman level intro bio lessons for everybody to understand the exact same way, but just not focused specifically on evolution, just all of biology.
I'm more of a math guy myself. Like biology is kind of messy, but yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Thanks so much,
Take care,
Mohammad. Call us back if you have more questions and let me know how it goes, especially raising a kid in Algeria under your circumstances. It'd be great to know.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
So that ends the caller thing. I'm getting ready to release Forrest so that he can go take whatever medication he needs to get back to, continuing to get healthy. Thanks so much for agreeing to fill in. I know we kind of pulled a bait and switch where you agreed to do a show with Jimmy, and then we had you do a show with me instead. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. I'm just happy to be here, man. I'm happy to help out. I like you both. I was expecting to be a little bit more healthy than I am today when I've agreed, but it's honestly, this is a great show. I've had a tremendous amount of fun, even if I look like it, I really am happy to be here, and I think we had amazing callers and amazing conversations. We just had a man understand the null hypothesis and statistical probability, and like that dude just explained a p-value without doing so. You know what I mean? Like that's pretty cool. Yep. That's pretty exciting.
That is, and this is at the top of the show. I've done this several times, and it's like, here's what we want. Tell us what you believe and why. Ask the questions. Listen, be honest. If you don't know, if you've got really bad reasons, just give them, and we'll say, I think that's a bad reason. And here's why. And all of this can be discussed. And it's not, our creationist caller today, apart from getting dropped for a technical thing, that call was going good. As concerned as I am about the world that I'm living in 2024, shows like today kind of reinvigorate me and give me good reasons. So for everybody who's tuned in, first of all, huge thank you to everybody who tuned in today, whether you are just watching, whether you're engaged in chat, whether you participate in Discord stuff. Your participation in the line community is incredibly welcome and needed. And on that front, you can join this line network. We've got over 106,000 subscribers. If you haven't liked and subscribed, you can go ahead and click like, you can click subscribe, you can ring the bell so you get notifications about this. You can share these videos with other people to try to get more theists to call in. And if there's a call that was one of your favorites, one that you thought was handled particularly well, if you watch the entire episode a day, when the short comes up, watch it too and share that. If you've got somebody who doesn't necessarily want, because we went for 3.5 hours, we're coming up on 4. If you got people aren't going to be interested in watching 3 or 4 hours of us going on and on, link out the shorts and stuff like that. Do your best to promote the channel, because as we grow, as there are more callers, the shows get nothing but better. You get better conversations. You get somebody calling in saying, "Oh, I heard you had this conversation with the other person and they missed this point." And cool, we can address all of that.
Let's do it.
I've already talked about the wishing my best to my buddy Dave. There won't be Dying Out Loud on the network anymore. But if you are not currently subscribed, if you've got some reason where you don't want to subscribe to YouTube, well, there are other ways where you can support the network. You can go to patreon.com/calltheline. You can also go to linemerch.com, where if you're a patron, you get a discount at linemerch.com as well. There's a number of different ways to support the network. I often forget to say what they are, but one of the biggest things you can do is watch the shows, share that you watched the shows, and participate. And this is just one show. Granted, it's Sunday. It's the premiere show, as we're going to talk about theism and all this other stuff. But there's also Skeptalk on Mondays, the Hang Up on Wednesdays, Transatlantic Call-In Show on Thursdays. There's also going to be debates with End Boss and other formats, as well as hostility stuff. I've got great guests coming up on my show in the near future. I'm sure as Forrest finishes up all of his degree work and video work and TikTok work and let me own the world with all of my science work, he'll be doing a lot more shows here as well too from time to time. So
yeah, potentially.
We thank you all, and thanks to our call screener and our moderators. I see Stephanie and Cookies and Clista and Morgan and Skeptics and Scoundrels and all that other stuff. You can go to patreon.com/calltheline to support us here. Join up right here. Take care of yourselves. We will see you all on all the other shows on the network all the rest of the week. I love you, babe. I love you, babe. Thanks for producing for us today. Arden back there doing the Lord's work.
I forgot we had an outro song. This is bopping. Oh.
I just realized my audio is probably not going to line up with the song audio for today, so I just look stupid. That's why I do this.